Well, welcome to another episode of By the Numbers. I'm your host, Richard Lewis. Joining me, as he always does, is the esports historian, Duncan Thorin Shields. How could we chronicle esports?
Here's the thing, though, Richard. A lot of people are probably going to get worried. They're going to think, you guys are milking it now. You've already had another show. I just saw one. Well, here's the thing. That was 4 or 5 days ago, Jack.
Yeah, that is
got your ass again.
That is actually a straight fire reference that I.
Was the only reason I even did all that, of course. I just crowbarred that in there. It was good though. It was good.
Well, yeah, 4 or 5 days ago, 7 days ago, 2 days ago. What is time when?
That's what I'll do. Listen, of all the things we complain about, the idea that now the acceleration has gone to the point that like people are talking about 4 or 5 years ago as though it's like, look, he was only 15 when he said it was 20 years ago. It's like, it was 4 or 5 days ago. That's a week ago. What are you talking about? That's as relevant as it can be. Like, please, Americans, please. You can't take time from us as well. You can't take the concept of time.
They're going to put it on the trophy cabinet. With fucking context, nuance, it's going to be up there, mate. Time will be the next victim. But anyway, yeah, we'll do the intro before we start, getting weird. So yeah, obviously, we're going to talk about Counterstrike. It is an unbelievably slow news week. If last episode was slow, this is fucking slow beyond a joke. So, spoiler, it's going to be a pretty ESIC heavy episode. Maybe, though, me and Duncan might get abstract, esoteric. We might talk about some other things. Who knows? And as always, we'll be taking your viewer questions. Before we get to that, a shout out to the sponsor for this show, of course, NordVPN. Happy to have them as a sponsor for the channel, not just this podcast. Obviously, they sponsor me personally and all my streams. It's a fantastic product. Very happy to partner with them. You can go and get yourself 74% off with the current deal. You go to nordvpn.com/RLS. Having a VPN, it's just common sense. Right then. So it's going to be an ESIC heavy episode, Duncan. They featured quite heavily this week. After months and months.
You know the only downside to this, I understand, and in fact, it's been one of my actual sort of bugbears the last few years, that when I realised that I myself, because I'm just a journalist, I'm not like a guy who's an expert about economics and stuff, when I found all the different areas of the industry that you have to really study to get into, obviously once you learn something, you want to help other people know it so they can also become enlightened, get a better sense of the industry. The sad thing I've realised though, is there are certain topics, and ESIC is definitely one of them, where when you say that, to me, that sounds interesting, like, oh, let's see where we go with this, what governing body should we have? The problem is, I do feel like there's a certain viewer out there who does just only tune in for hilarious banter, and that sounds like you've just been like, well, there's no CS week, so we're just going to have an episode of C-SPAN political concerts. Like, well, the thing about the neoliberal position, that's what it sounds like when you say it's going to be an ESIC heavy episode. Please,
I would love a podcast with Red Eye discussing the neoliberal position. Like, that would be fantastic.
Would be sick,
I always said that it was a deep hope and a fervent prayer that eventually one day when Red Eye moved out of esports, obviously, before he got assassinated by Banks. Yes. What was going to happen was he was going to create his own podcast about his views of the world and politics, because he used to have a column when I used to work with him at Esports Heaven when he was my boss, called Red's Corner, as in like boxing, the red corner, right? And it was his bit where he got to say whatever he wanted, and he was a weekly columnist. It was a big part of our content plan, along with mine, which was called Gonzaria, which everyone hated as a name.
What I don't understand is the name he's picked. He's picked the shittest name. Your name is Red Eye. Make it something to do with Eye on the Scene or something. Yeah, I know, he goes, my name's Red Eye, of course, Rich, so I've gone with the obvious one. All right, think it Red's Corner, innit? It's like,
yeah. So that's what he used to be called, Red's Corner.
All right.
And anyway, I was always hoping he was going to take that concept when he did get out of esports and just have a podcast where it was just, we've joked about this privately.
And just feel like, here's why Brexit was the wrong move.
Just something like that. And today my guest is Nigel Farage.
Yes.
Just something like, oh mate, it will be so good. Like,
I watch every episode. I'm not even lying.
Oh mate, I would. That is the shit that in my veins now. Where if it was like, I don't often read the bloody papers. The only good thing in papers is fish and chips. But I read this staggering column by Jeremy Clarkson, and then it would just be, mate, it would be so delicious. It would nourish my soul, but it doesn't exist because Red Eye's having a hiatus. And when he sees this, because I know he checks in, he has a special algorithm that tracks every mention of his name. Paul, please come back. It's time. Please come back. Start with esports. Make them remember what they've lost, and then let's do it. Non-stop political Paul podcasts, please. But anyway, look, We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it an interesting episode by talking about ESIC. ESIC have been on a long hiatus. I mean, what the big criticism they've had from the community is, of course, a lack of communication. I know from obviously behind the scenes, what's been going on there is essentially it is a really short-staffed engagement. We've brought that up many times, but then imagine if the two people in charge had some like personal issues, and then for whatever reason had to take time off work, because that's what happened. And so we found ourselves in this situation where, unfortunately, because esports is a corrupt cesspit, the incidents were piling up, but there was no one there to process them. Appeals were piling up. There was no one there to process those. And so E6, I've said it before, trying to clean up esports, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Sam put it in perspective for me the other day when we were a few drinks deep, because he's up visiting at the moment, in case you hear him echoing or whatever. And he just said, mate, we can't even clean up football. So why the fuck are you banging your head against that wall? Because I'm idealistic. I want esports to be different to all the other esports, but there's no chance to clean up. It's a fool's endeavor. So ESIC obviously trying to do it with a skeleton crew of just bitten off way more than they can chew. And I think you can still admire them for the moxie, but ultimately where we're at now, I think the criticism is valid that these things are taking as long as they're taking, because if you have bad actors in the system being processed, they still get to be bad actors until you reach a decision. And then also, if it takes that long to process it and an appeal's likely, well, even if they're guilty, an appeal has to be processed as expediently as possible. Everyone is entitled to that. It's one of the bugbears about the American justice system, just appellate courts in general around the world. The conviction happens, it comes down pretty quick, and then you get trapped into some Kafkaesque system of appeals, all the way up to the Supreme Court in America, for example, where the appeals, let's say you're found guilty, you've spent 10 years inside trying to get to that verdict. So,
it's even worse in esports when you consider how shortened the career length is. Yeah, exactly. Like, another thing people aren't factoring in is TOs. Literally, we're at the point now where there's so much money in esports. If we're talking at the top pro level, they could even themselves get sued if they actually exclude someone who appears to have done some dodgy shit, but they haven't got all the evidence for it. Like, you could just say, you take away my livelihood. So unfortunately, basically, even if a TO, the sentiment is, I know this person probably is guilty, you have to wait for them to carry out the fucking investigation and come to the conclusion, unfortunately.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just typing someone here because I've just given up on this podcast, taking it professional. I mean, look, the ESIC announcements that have sort of come a bit thick and fast. So let's try and encompass them, and we'll kind of work through each one. So the one that I reported on, let me ask
you this at the beginning, because one thing I have as an obvious follow-up question in light of the last 3 or 4 times we've talked about ESIC, it's been the same story, Richard. It's right, in theory they're working on this, but it's taking a bit longer, no one knows when it'll be done. Here's my question, right? It's a brutal question, but I have to ask it. Isn't one of the mistakes they're making trying to be the fucking world police of this? Shouldn't they just be harsh and say, right, we're doing tier 1 only, we're doing these major regions only initially? Because at the moment, you can't tell someone, investigate all of Australian match fiction and then simultaneously investigate all of tier 2 NA, and then also can you please investigate all of CI? There are already so many hours in the day, so I'm sorry, as much as I hate to say it, I don't really give a fuck what people do in Australian tier 3 Counterstrike. I do really care obviously about the tier 1 stuff. So is there almost a case for triage and to just say, right, we've got to just go with the most important cases?
I think the problem with that approach is, unfortunately, corruption. And I can say this now, having written about it for a long time and having been mired in all the match fixing that's gone on in CS behind the scenes. I've seen stuff that probably is never going to get published.
Of course.
En masse. I've seen the sprawl. And the problem you have is when you talk about triage, the corruption is always systemic. What happens is, if you let it slide in the tier 3, the tier 2 guys are looking over going, how the fuck is a tier 3 guy making more money than me? And also the organized crime syndicates that push these things, very often, as we're seeing now. What they do is they go, well, if no one's coming for tier 3, why don't we expand our scope and move into tier 2? Why don't we go and create an essentially fake betting platform? And, you know, and so they become more and more ambitious in what they want to do because nobody takes the stand in the first instance. And so, unfortunately, I know a lot of people aren't enamored with the idea of a slippery slope these days, because typically it's an argument used by Christian conservatives to, you know, arrest societal progress and bigotry. But unfortunately, a lot of slopes are pretty fucking slippery, and certainly when it comes
started to seem like it, didn't it? You know, they sort of had to come up with that theory there, didn't they? Back in the... I also thought it was silly, but.
Yeah,
but there was a grain of truth to that, and also wasn't there?
No, it's the same thing. It's, you know, like, again, because it's going to be a pretty broad show. I mean, look, the idea of the slippery slope. I mean, certainly when it comes to human nature of greed and what you can and can't get away with, you have to say there's a kernel of truth in it. That doesn't mean people can't change. Doesn't mean people can't have redemption arcs. I mean, I can speak from my own personal human experiences. Once you cross a threshold for the first time, whatever that threshold is, it is certainly easier to cross it again.
Even a small one like nick a little bit of money out of someone's pocket.
Yeah.
Obviously, all it takes is you do 50 pence, it'll be £1 next time. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously when you get caught, you know, it's the totality of the sin that you essentially atone for. And then you're judged on whether or not you're going to slip again, whether or not you're going to stick to the rigid adherence, the reinforcement of what the punishment and punitive measures bring about. But, you know, the other issue you've got with the kind of idea of a slippery slope is very often the starting point is a reasonable one, you know, and so it's like I used to be a big proponent of political correctness, if you can believe that. I've written polemic arguments about how political correctness is a good thing and that we should try and find a sort of consensus for language that makes everyone feel uncomfortable.
Yours was more sort of in the vein of kind of like Stuart Lee stuff from the like last 10 years ago, where it was more sort of the idea that like you should make people uncomfortable and you should be that kind of angle, right? Not being an arsehole to people, I'm presuming.
Yeah, and so obviously, like, I've written a number of articles where I debunked a lot of shit, you know, like war on Christmas nonsense you get again from like the Daily Mail, you know, because people might want to call the Christmas holiday period like just a holiday period, or winterval is something that's relatively new. And what that's doing is it's not an eradication of Christmas. People do that because actually, you know, when I looked into it, it encompasses all of November, all of December, and the end of January, because different religions and different cultural groups have different holidays. So why not include them all? Makes more sense if you're running a shop, for example, because, you know, you can have what we would traditionally call a Christmas sale, a holiday sale, runs for a longer period of time. That's all it is. It's business. It's got nothing to do with, you know, we want to eradicate Judeo-Christian values in society. So, you know, I did a lot of debunking of this. But then, unfortunately, you have to say there is a point where this endless tone policing and the endless policing of language and making that a priority, turns out political correctness was a slippery slope, even though I would have been with you all the way until round about where we're at now. And so slippery slopes are a very real thing, and people sort of have to... You sort of have to watch when you gain momentum on the slippery slope. Yes. And I think, for example, where I've always been sympathetic with the position when it comes to match fixing, and I make no bones about this either, is a lot of these players are being treated by other entities like their full-time employees, and they have to practice 8 hours a day, and they have to win their game, and they have to make all these sacrifices. What do they get for it? Well, you don't get a salary. We might let you keep your prize money. In fact, we're actually going to wreck you on that and try and take a cut of that somewhere down the line. We might let you keep your sticker money if you get to an event. Whoopsie, we weren't expecting to get there. We're actually going to keep it. Read the small print in your contract. That's our IP. And so what you end up with is players who are essentially chasing the esports dream, putting in full-time hours, perhaps even on top of studies or part-time jobs or caring for family members or whatever else is that occupies their time, and they get nothing for it. And so somebody comes along and says, I can get you $1,000 if you just don't play as hard in this game.
Oh, that's a sympathetic position. I mean, the obvious analogy I would draw, by the way, it's a bit like if you ever hear those stories. If you're European and you hear the stories of some player was involved with tampering in the NCAA, you're like, So what you're telling me is a 19-year-old who has no money in the world actually like used his first advantage to get some money for himself or his family. Like, yeah, that doesn't seem like the biggest crime in the world. The point is, you can build a reason as to why it's not as crazy as someone just like literally sat there evil. Like, I will now commit crime because I like it. Yeah, it's obviously different.
Exactly, and then where the sort of individual slippery slope begins is now you've done it. Now you're in it. And you get away with it. You get away with it once, you get away with it twice. Suddenly you can justify the time investment. And then maybe you get invited to join another group on, Telegram, is what they use now, or WhatsApp because of the peer-to-peer encryption. And suddenly you're talking to someone from an organized crime syndicate. Now they have their fingers in some particularly unpleasant pies that you might not want to think about. It was like I always used to blow it off. Adverts you used to get before, like you wouldn't steal a car, it funds terrorism. And I was like, mate, my pirate copy of fucking Transformers the movie ain't funding fucking Al Qaeda. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But then it actually turns out, there's a grain of truth to it. They've raided people who were selling knockoff DVDs, and it turns out, some of that money is going to drug gangs, terrorist associations. It's a legit thing. So when you become a partner in what is essentially a criminal enterprise, you probably don't want to think too much about why you're talking to that person and why they're interested in you, because now you're essentially complicit in something far bigger and far more wide-reaching. But that's fine. All I do is fix the games. So you get to compartmentalize it, but things are already spiraling out of control by that point. And then let's say you start talking to other people. You start conspiring to have a team that essentially exists only to fix matches. Maybe you enter a league of which there are a number active right now and have been in the past. Entire leagues that are a contrivance. And now every game you play is rigged in some way, scripted in some way. The outcomes are known because you don't just have you and your friends betting on it anymore. You have dozens of people betting on it, including crime syndicates. And eventually, when this all comes tumbling down via law enforcement, somebody getting cold feet, someone trying to walk away, someone is going to get hurt because criminals, they can only enforce things one particular way. And unfortunately, it is off the books violence. And this is why I've been saying for a long time, be careful what you think you're getting into, because your actions might not get you hurt. You might be safe geographically. They might not know much about you. Someone somewhere in the chain, when it breaks down, is going to get really hurt or potentially killed.
Yeah, people don't know. One of the reasons why I always was disgusted by Westerners who knew nothing about like Korea and China, and they judged it as if it was them who did the exact same thing, Richard, is the stories I heard about some of the match fixing in China and Korea was like, you are literally, if not directly dealing with a real triad type guy, you're like one guy from the guy. And sometimes they would essentially even sort of imply like someone will get hurt if this doesn't happen. So like, yeah, as you're saying, even if it's not you, know that maybe his connections to a guy who gets fucked up because of this, because you won't throw the game anymore. So it ain't as simple as you just choosing for yourself anymore. That's the worst part about when you get embroiled with criminal behavior like that. Of course, they have the hooks in you, don't they? Yeah,
and some people, they at that point, they want to get out. During my investigations and interviews, I've got probably, dozens, maybe even close to 100 hours of like recorded interviews with people who were either in the periphery of match fixing or directly involved. And a lot of these people want to get out, and a lot of these people can't. And a lot of these people are afraid because, I mean, again, there are legitimate crime organizations, as we saw in the announcement we're going to get to, that they've had their hooks in esports for a while now. And I think, it's all fun and games when you're some kid from Canada who believes you're completely immune. But those same people are talking to the people that do this. And like you say, there's people in Korea, there's people in China, there's people in Russia. It's no joke out there.
Yep.
It's not you throw a game for $1,000 because you want to get a pair of fucking, new Nikes or whatever. Those guys are doing it generally to help their family who exist in grinding poverty to begin with. And then if at any point they don't keep doing the increasingly risky thing, that there's a very real risk of physical reprisals. So anyway, all of that said, the problem I've always had with the sort of taking that hands-off approach and trying to prioritize. It's great for workflow, but the problem you've got is you allow the cancer to metastasize. And so if, for example, I know they received a lot of criticism, ESIC did, for the handling of the Australian case. A lot of people had their bans overturned on a technicality, even though they were absolutely guilty of things that, if had they existed in any other region or played in any other league, would have got them bans. And they've never shut the fuck up about it. I mean, the Australian community, it's like, guys, pipe the fuck down. It was appeal on a technicality. Well, it's not like you didn't do anything.
What's insane about, if people don't know what Richard's referring to, if you got off with something that you did do, a crime, but you got off on a technicality, if you were a reasonable human being, you'd shut the fuck up and go, I hope no one notices I get away with it. No, what these guys did was the equivalent. This is my analogy. You know, in America, there are those very specific laws about warrants, at least there were back in the day, where, for example, if a policeman pulls you over, but he doesn't actually have any, like, just cause to search you, but he just decides, obviously racial lines would be the obvious old example, he just decides to search you anyway, and then he goes, oh, look what I found here, a load of guns and money and drugs. Believe it or not, there are cases in America where they could actually say, no joke, that is inadmissible evidence by how he got it. And as a result, even though we did find guns and drugs, you're actually innocent. Now, imagine in that scenario, running out the courtroom going, see, you all said I had guns and drugs. I don't. It's a lie. I didn't. I'm a great guy. You'd be a dickhead, wouldn't you? Like, listen, you got off with it. Yeah, technically you didn't do it, but you're not a good guy because of it. Like, that's the worst thing, Richard. I saw these comments you're like referring to the gist of. People were, it's like celebrating that they are pieces of shit, but they just didn't get nailed. What?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and so, you know, the position that ESIC were in, they could have ignored that.
Sure.
It would literally have, it doesn't benefit them at all. Like, you're right, it's tier 3 Australian Counterstrike. It couldn't be more fucking irrelevant on the world stage, which is essentially what ESIC are trying to do. They want to make a big public show of cleaning up esports, and so doing this doesn't really achieve anything. But the problem you've got is if you allow that to fester, then how far up does it go? You could have players being brought into the tier 1 Australian teams, like some Renegades and 100 Thieves, who are dirty in the past and maybe want to continue that, or maybe it's going to come up at some point. Keep in mind as well, another thing that happens is, I mean, this is again another bit, somebody fucking match fixes. Someone knows that you match fix, you share a betting slip, you share a DM with them on Twitter, or you message them on Discord, or you send them a snap and someone screenshots it, and now they've got it over you, and they can threaten you to do all sorts of things. Maybe you play their team in a league and they go, well, you're definitely losing the games against me, or I'll just leak all this information publicly. We still never got to the bottom of what happened with Captain Mo in that regard, you know, publicly admitted to having been approached by someone who asked him to fix a game while he was the IGL at Tai Lu, published very weird chat logs that made it look like he'd had conversations with the guy on multiple occasions and didn't reject the notion of throwing a game, and also hadn't reported it to anyone until well after the fact. And the only reason he did it was because they were blackmailing him and were going to go public. So he tried to get ahead of the story. Because it's China, they obviously have exceptionalism to corruption in esports, because everyone loves Chinese money in esports. So, you know, it's like, I understand why you have to take the stand very early on, because that spreads through. And obviously as well with international ties, don't just think those guys in Australia are fixing matches in a vacuum. There's people in China who are talking to them saying, what do I bet? Because if a Chinese guy bets on
people don't know. They're not just betting on Chinese stuff. They bet on everything in the world.
Yeah, so having an in to a foreign market is hugely profitable and desirable. So, look, I totally get it with ESIC. I mean, for me, I just think, like, you know, they need more staff. They need more people, you know. They need people who can take these cases and run with them without having to consult the upper echelons or the people with the legal expertise. And until they get that, they're going to be a very inefficient body for esports. And I guess, case in point, the first story we'll come to from out of ESIC this week, because everyone got back from their own personal issues and they're starting to work on the backlog. So let's start with the first one. Obviously, there was a recording that came out. It was people from a team called Rebirth, and obviously sometimes known as Blood, Sweat and Tears. And they had been caught on a audio recording, basically conspiring to fix a number of games. And so that recording, so people have an idea of the timeline, was in the hands of relevant parties September last year. It's been a year, right? And ESIC have ruled that the two people that are doing the driving of the conversation, a guy called Recchi and a guy called Fourpack, that's Sebastian Recchi Tropiano and Kevin Fourpack Prspazniak, those two guys have been hit with a 5-year ban. The person that was talking to them that didn't flinch and didn't make any sort of like intimations, guys, this is wrong. What are you doing? Oh my, I'm so shocked. A guy called Carson, who was listed as a player called Nosrak, he was also banned for 111 days, i.e. time served, because failure to report is, of course, a violation of the code of conduct. But while we're just on the point that you were making, where you said, you can't believe that people would want to kind of try and like, oh, we got off on a technicality, so I'm not a scumbag. I'll just bring, everyone's attention to what Carson himself tweeted when they were suspended from ESEA pending the additional parts of this investigation. And he said, after 4 months of a false ban from ESEA, ESIC recommended them to unban me. Interesting, ESEA banned people off an assumption from insufficient evidence. They're willing to ruin careers, then unban them like nothing happened. Innocent until proven guilty doesn't exist these days. Well, my suggestion there, Carson, mate, would don't play in a team with blatant match fixers repeatedly. And certainly, while they're awaiting judgment, when there is an unbelievable, overwhelming amount of evidence against them and 34 other individuals which you freely associate with, maybe sever those ties. Maybe don't jump into another team playing with some of these guys. The idea that this was innocent until proven guilty is absolutely nonsense. And in fact, the 111-day ban that he served for not reporting, I think is unbelievably lenient, and it is only predicated on the fact that then when they dug into him further, they couldn't find any evidence of him placing bets. But in the same way, like say, playing in a team and knowing that a throw is going on, you may as well. Yeah. You of course you complicit.
Question is just at what level, but you're definitely complicit. Of course.
Yeah, and how do I know that he understood these guys were throwing? He didn't bat an eyelid. He is sat in their private channel, which, by the way, I know from interviews, when this was recorded, they had a specific channel that only they had the ability to hear or speak in, and that is where they would jump into to fix games. So if somebody came in the channel, if for any reason it was violated, nobody could hear them. So they would go to this channel, and it was the channel specifically for fixing games, and that's what they did. And somebody got in who wasn't meant to be there, that had the permissions, because they fucked up and recorded them and left the team. And now we know. So it's absolutely insane to me that this guy's trying to, walk this off like he did nothing wrong.
All his friends who were fucking pros and ex-pros are just below him, the fucking comments saying like, oh yeah, as like agreeing with his sentiment as well. Like, what? You guys want fucking people like that in the seat?
Yeah. Exactly. So they finally got around. Now, the problem with this is, the criticism of this is that this, as I said, they've had this recording, I think, since the end of last year. And for me, I don't know what's going on in esports anymore. I've talked to a number of journalists recently, and they're like, what are you doing with the match fixing stuff? And I said, I'm going to wait until I get out and publish it all. But the reason I have to wait until I quit is because the community is just so fucking dumb that there is no balance of probability. There is no reasonable suspicion. There is no too many coincidences.
Yes.
These people will argue until the ends of the earth that players are innocent.
Oh, if they like them, they absolutely will. Yes, I agree.
I think not even that, and I'll explain why. It's a psychological phenomenon with esports fans. Because the audience is young and they're all aspirational and they all want to be pro players themselves, whenever somebody is outed as a cheater, Whenever somebody is outed as a match fixer, whenever somebody is outed as having done something wrong and it's going to impact on their career, their instinct is to defend them because they see themselves. And they think to themselves, but what if I was so good, people called me a cheater? Right? And so they immediately defend that person as if it was them. They don't think about the evidence. They're not interested in that. They just put themselves in a hypothetical scenario where if they were falsely accused, how would they feel? And because of that, every time somebody like me comes out with a story about a player did this, player did that, you know, it's the same. Nobody wants to believe it. They don't want to believe it because what if it was me? Richard Lewis tweets mean things. What if Richard Lewis was going after me? And he's already got me blocked on Twitter. So, you know, how can you believe him? How can you believe the guy with the 100% record over the guy who's got all these weird coincidences against him? And so if I actually published everything I knew, because I know everything, I know the sprawl, I know the original guys, I know the guys who taught the guys, I've got conversations, I got screenshots, I got almost every fixed game in the ESEA. You know, like I know everyone that was fixed, thrown, had bets. I've got the odds swings. I've got everything, like in real time. I have all the data. I should technically be able to publish that. If I was a journalist writing about football and I published that, I'd probably be getting some fucking award.
Yes, yeah.
Instead, if I publish that in esports, I will be drummed out in disgrace because the fans will say I made it all up. So on we go. ESIC is for some reason, ESIC is going to be more legitimate than anything I'll report. So we just have to wait, I guess. And in the meantime, people have got away with some fucking bad shit and they're feathering their nest in other games right now. So there's nothing I can do. You guys have all done this to yourself. Not one of you, you know, like fucking the fans never took match fixing seriously, you know. And no one else did. TOs certainly didn't until it was too late. Valve essentially enabled the turbocharge of it by creating a fucking proto cryptocurrency and then letting everyone have the API to create casinos for it. Nobody gave a fuck. And here we are. So how quick is this investigation going to go? I think the criticism's completely valid, Duncan, because it shouldn't... for me, if somebody is caught on tape saying something... It can't get any more than that. And even then, the fans are so fucking stupid. When that recording went out, I saw people going, yeah, it sounds to me like 4Pack didn't want to do it. You could tell by the tone in his voice. He's
reading in his mind.
He's actively having a conversation that is conspiracy to throw a number of games to benefit his team financially. They are talking about paying out in cryptocurrency because they believe it isn't traceable. They're talking about using cheats, like he's on radar. That's, you know, what I don't get. Like, I don't get the community's viewpoint when they heard it. And I certainly don't get why it's took a year to dole out 5-year bans to these two cunts. You know, like, what more do you... If a recording's not going to do it, guys, I got bad news for you. You're going to think the rest of the evidence, which is a chain of unbelievable circumstantial evidence...
Yes, of course.
Right? Like, that's not going to be enough either. So I don't know what we do. It seems to me that unless... someone is stupid enough, and some of them are, of course, as we found out in the past. If someone is stupid enough to go and place the bet themselves on the game using their name, their ID, and then they underperform massively, you might be able to pin it on them, or 100% in the eyes of the community. Unfortunately, if the gears are going to grind this slow, how are we going to get through 34?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if people don't realise, the problem in this scenario is, it's like you say, put it this way, this is where I would explain it. We are not an actual court. This is not a real thing where you go to prison because of what we do. We're talking about investigating what is done to these people competitively. So actually, I'm sorry, it actually would be entirely within the remit of, I'm guessing it's the SEA in this case, to say, look, even though we don't actually have evidence you did match fixing, we just don't want people who brag and privately have conversations about how they like to match fix our league. If that coincides with a bunch of coincidences that makes it look like you match fixed, we will just say we do not want your business, essentially. You can't play in our league. I wouldn't have a problem with that. As you say, the odds that that person is actually totally innocent and being railroaded, pretty unlikely, actually, if you look at like the, on the even scale of things, if you like consider who would have to be involved, what the motivate, it's very unlikely they are in that scenario. And as you say, if we're going to have to get a really extreme, like we are like the courts, we've got to have like nailed to the ground, we're just not going to get anyone. There's almost no one you're going to get that. Yeah. I always say this, never forget that Valve only acted once Richard had the fucking phone of the iBuyPower case. Having all the bets, having all the skit, that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. Well, we're not even going to have that for some of these cases. Like, that would actually be a good stand if we could have, but it's going to be hard to get that for every single fucking one of these cases, yeah.
Cross-referencing phone records for one match. I mean, it's... With the weight of testimony we had people self-implicating, and it wasn't enough in the eyes of the community. Shazam gave a statement and said, yeah, this happened. I did place a bet. I'm totally, what? So he self-implicated in a fucking conspiracy, and people went, Shazam does like to tell tales, though, doesn't he? He's a bit flamboyant, prone to exaggerate, like. Everybody will just bend time and space to avoid the most obvious explanation, which is what these guys are up to. So, I mean, look, that came out, and then I was like, oh, fucking hell. Because when they said there was going to be an update, I thought, right, you're going to have worked through some of the cases and utilizing some of the evidence I've sent across. We're going to start taking a big chunk out of these people. As I'll also add as well, I mean, look, you owe it to the people that are sort of dangling to get to it quickly. I mean, you don't really owe them anything because they're pieces of shit. But the point is, there's a number of people who've moved over to Valorant who are as guilty as all fuck. Everybody knows it. You can go watch the demos of the games. They've been absolutely outrageously unsubtle. The demos alone should be enough to ban these players. Right?
By the way, back in the day, how we used to do it. We used to just look in the demo, and if it was really dodgy, you ban. That's it. Even ESL, I know fans are going to go, not the great ESL. Yeah, even ESL used to just have a German admin look at this shit and go, yeah, fucking ban him. That was it. Yeah. That was the standard.
And these guys now, right, they don't know if they're going to get banned or not. They're still maintaining the position, a lot of them. They're lying to everyone. We didn't do it, or we're not even in the investigation. And so what happens is Valorant orgs go, oh, we'll pick you up. And then they pick them up, and then somebody whispers in their ear, these are the guys that are probably going to get banned, and then the Valorant orgs drop them. Now, if you're not going to ban these guys, let them get on with their fucking careers. It'll stick in my craw, because I know what they've done. But if you ain't got enough to charge them, you got to let them get on with their fucking lives, and that's that. And so this hesitancy, this time scale, it doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for the orgs that want to leverage their talent in a new game. It doesn't work for the players. It doesn't work for the betting agencies. It doesn't work for the league. You have got to step up and start charging these people and make sure it's enough to put them down solid so you're not a laughing stock, because that's the other aspect of it. ESIC need to do this quickly, but they need to do it so precise, because I don't think their reputation can hold up to another bunch of appeals.
Because the vibe is they just never get anything done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, people. Well, I mean, after what happened in Australia, where it was a technicality, and then the incident where they nearly banned some dude from fucking mouse sports for just using the fucking scoreboard because they didn't know what the features on the scoreboard were. The people who were handling the case, they thought they were doing. It was looking at the money. That was the original thing. They were going to ban him as if it was stream sniping. And they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. So that nearly happened. Fortunately, that disaster was averted. But the problem is ESIC have an authority right now they will not have if they fuck up again. People will just be like, listen, you can't do this, So they've got to do it quickly, and they have to do it precisely. So it's a real unenviable position. Now, with that said, they did do something good, which I think is going to benefit everybody. They set up something called their transparency initiative. So now, if you go to ESIC's website, they have something called the Matters Register, and it shows you all the open investigations and what stage they're at, any assumptive dates of resolution, and every decision that's been made. And they've said they're going to build it out so it's a database of every appeal, every punishment, every process, every press release. So, that needed to happen at the start. That's the starting point for the project. But they are going to get there now. And as a result, we know they're still investigating the former CEO of the Akuma guys based on the shenanigans that went on with the CIS RMR. And obviously, the one we're going to talk about now, they're still investigating our boy Hunden. So, let's talk about this. Hunden. This is, as I said before, just in case anyone's missed what this is about, basically ahead of IEM Cologne, Hunden didn't travel with the team. They said there'd been a breakdown in trust. People didn't know what that meant. Hunden himself, who'd already served a ban for using the coaching bug, came out and said, you're going to hear some rumors about me that I've shared information with the rival team, but I didn't. It was just anti-strats. Nothing to see here, folks. And then Heroic had to go after that. And they said, that's not what happened. He locked us out of our drive with all of our preparation for the tournament because we were arguing and he was potentially seeking employment from our local rivals, Astralis. By the way, my sources behind the scenes now are telling me that, yeah, the people he was trying to share it with were Astralis.
Seems obvious, but I mean, you could never know till you know, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously...
Which makes it more sinister, I have to say.
Yeah, of course. He was their prospective future employer. So this has been an absolute mess, and we've had a report come out today. The official ESIC ruling is meant to be coming out on Friday, but the report that's come out, which is on on Danish TV2, is that Hunden's going to get a 2-year ban. Which for me, I think will essentially end his career as a coach.
Of course, yeah.
So, I mean, we'll get into the ins and outs of that, but your reaction to the 2-year ban, should that be accurate?
I mean, first of all, I think it's warranted. You look at what he's done, you look at his track record. This is now his second significant offence he's had within, like, let's be like a 1-year time span or something. That's pretty ridiculous. I also think that the sad thing about this particular case is I do feel like, in line with what we were talking about young people earlier, having stupid, like, hills to die on with who to defend. Sadly, I feel like there are a lot of morons who think, but no one clicked the link for the strats. Like, that is irrelevant. That is irrelevant. That's like, if he'd planned to murder someone and we had it all charted out, if he just didn't murder the person at the end, does he also just get to go innocent and free and like nothing ever happens? Of course not. Like, his intention, as far as we can tell, and the worst part is that, yeah, as you say, the worst fear of all was, I even said it, like, don't let it be Astralis, mate, because I'm sorry, Hundred is a piece of shit. Like, this is not a good human being on the basis of this move here. Here's the thing. Even the one before had, like, the caveat that wasn't he technically one of the coaches who did actually also try to, like, publicly or privately say something about... Wasn't he one of the ones who actually, like, before he was totally outed, he did actually come forward and help with the investigation, I believe, on the coaching bug, right?
It was why I was willing to be more lenient in my assessment.
I'm saying. So my problem is that also made me think, right, maybe he did just fuck up that one main time, or have he done it, but he realised I've got to make amends. This is like not only back to back have you done another thing, but I think in some ways, I think that's part of me thinks that's even slimier, because what you were trying to do is get hired by someone by essentially sharing fucking trade secrets from your current employer while petulantly locking your current employer out of the fucking trade. That is mental. Like, that is so unethical. It genuinely makes me think, like, I don't care how many good players you found in Counterstrike or how good you are as a coach. Why would anyone want you in their organization unless they are inherently and explicitly a corrupt organization? Like, as in, I hope they've even thought this through. They won't, because they're so dumb in esports. But as in the same way as I made fun of the fact that Heroic was cool with Hunden fucking over Astralis and whoever else as long as he was on their team, like, when are some of these orgs going to actually take accountability? The same dogshit orgs bragging to us all about their corporate values, but all their corporate values involve hiring cheaters, match fixers. Like, what the fuck is this, guys? Like, I know there's a competitive advantage to hiring someone else can't, that is good at their job. But eventually there's got to be a line in the sand where you go, I don't hire people who are just pieces of shit, do I? Like, at one point in time, that's going to have to reflect on me, innit, if I hire people like that to surround myself with. So I think it's totally justified. I think it's an absolute tragedy for what it'll mean for the Danish scene, because this guy could have brought through so many talents. I even think if you glaive, mate, I've just fucking signed my 3-year contract. I thought I had you to find all the talent for me. Like, what? And I'm losing Sonic as well. Like, mate, you fucked up a whole bunch of people's careers with this move, sadly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, look, we're going to get to the next part of the saga. It's like, I still can't process the argument that he was, the argument he tried to make.
How he's downplaying this, I don't get. Yeah, what's the downplay, mate?
Where it's like I only gave out anti-strats, and as I said, I mean, it's largely irrelevant. You attempted to subvert the integrity of a competition by sharing information with rivals to your current employer because you were locked in a grievance with them.
Let me give everyone an analogy, right? Let's essentially, for the sake of argument, accept that an anti-strat, right, we're talking about, is something you could tell someone. Here's an observation I made when I watched a demo. Here's an anti-strat, right? You could do this kind of a rap on air on Inferno to counter the way they hold, right? Effectively, what you're saying in that scenario, if you're Hunden, is no biggie, guys, but I essentially moonlighted as a coach for a rival team, or tried to, at the event I'm supposed to be coaching my team at, but I'm in a dispute with them, so that's no big deal. That is a big deal. Yeah. What are you talking about? That's inherently a big deal. What are you talking about? Like I say, imagine as a fan, imagine it wasn't that he'd done the folder. Imagine someone just came and they had paparazzi pictures of him wearing an Astralis jersey in their boot camp room, pointing at a screen going, yeah, they tend to go like here. Like, he'd be coaching their fucking team while working for the other squad. If you can't see that, that's a problem. I don't know how anyone can defend this guy's position. This one has no defense as far as I can tell. The best defense is they didn't open the file, which is like, well, you fucking got saved by that, but you didn't get entirely saved, mate.
Yeah, and so I don't know what's going on with the heroic lawsuit. And I get like, as I said, I think that's a fucking waste of everyone's time personally.
Oh, it is for sure.
But like, Hunden came out today, and seriously, I don't think he understands how little goodwill there is left.
I know.
Like, I don't think he gets it. People are fucking tired of you. They're tired of your bullshit now. People are staggered at the fact that you have got yourself embroiled in something this petty again after being given essentially a second chance, not just by the community, but by Heroic themselves, who you've then subsequently turned on. People don't like that. That goes beyond optics. People will recoil in revulsion at someone that fundamentally disloyal and slimy, and you will forever be remembered in that way. It's like people just can't handle it. But he did this interview with TV2.dk, and he claims, saying that ESIC didn't even hear him out in the case, and he says he's never been heard specifically for this case by them. And he also alleges that ESIC have threatened him by saying if he chooses to appeal the verdict, which will be 2 years, they'll extend the ban to 5 years. Now, there's a lot there. First of all...
It's a massive thing to unpack, isn't it?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, my opinion is this. I don't believe him.
As in that they threatened the
I don't believe any of it.
Yes. Okay.
I think this is the last roll of the fucking dice. If you got evidence, by the way, Nikolai, you know me, I'll torch anyone that's doing the wrong shit. Show me the emails. Show me how they threatened you. Show me how they communicated. I'll have you on my show. I'll publish it all, and I'll go fucking thermonuclear on ESIC, because if they have done that, that's unacceptable. Now, just on the points, I think if you're going to issue someone with a ban, you absolutely have to hear out their side.
Oh, so that goes without saying, yeah.
They have to be able to give an account of themselves. And if they haven't done that as some sort of time-saving measure, because obviously he has publicly admitted to an aspect of it, right? So maybe it's just based on that public admission. That's not good enough. Guy's got to be in a room here and explain himself, or on a Zoom call, or however we're doing it. Right, and then the next aspect is if they've in any way presumptively told him the outcome of an appeal is already pre-decided, and if you do appeal, it'll
that's
be worse.
Outrageous in itself. Yeah, that. By the way, I'd be totally on your side on it if that's true. On that particular case, that is outrageous. Yeah, of course. You can't tell someone, and if you try to prove you're innocent, I'll fucking double your punishment. You can't do that, can you?
No.
Even if you are guilty and it turns out you're guilty in the end. Because what people don't get is people are going to think that the time wasting element stuff. No, in this case, maybe there's like a detail that you need to argue, of course. You have to have the chance to appeal. By the way, the sad thing about this conversation I've realised is actually the depressing thing about the current state of like society is when people have these discussions, Richard, as fucked as the system can be, you actually realise that the average person, because of how badly educated they are nowadays, doesn't even agree with like basic concepts that have essentially allowed Western civilization to have any success, like, innocent until proven guilty, like ability to like be represented in the court, appeals. Like they don't believe in like core basic principles. Like they really would just like you'd just be done over your first accusation.
Due process is a thing of the past, brother, But yeah, so for me, look, if any of that's true, it's problematic, dare I say.
For sure. Yeah.
But I mean, the most problematic aspect would be the appeal for me. Because first of all, with an appeal, you don't know what new evidence is going to be introduced. So you cannot say, if you do appeal, we will give you more than double the punishment, because you have presumptively selected the outcome, and it appears punitive by itself. Almost as if, let's say, for example, you were an overworked governing body that didn't want to have to process appeals.
Yeah.
And so again, the how that looks is horrific. So I certainly hope that isn't true. I mean, I got no way of verifying that, but Hunden must have a way of publicly proving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he does, that if you want to get yourself, I mean, look, when everyone starts slinging shit around, and obviously as a journalist and a guy that's done PR and know a little bit about this, if you've got something like that, suddenly people aren't talking about what a piece of shit you are. They're talking about whether or not you're going to get a fair deal. Think OJ trial if you need examples. I'll get you all thinking about this fucking glove, and we'll ignore all and the fact that police did try and shore up the case by fucking doing evidence tampering. And in the meantime, while everyone's talking about that and doing the rhyme, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Yes. You're not focusing on the other overwhelming evidence that proves OJ did it. Just as a fun aside, Duncan, he did an interview just the other day, which I caught because I was going to put it on I Hate It.
I can't believe we didn't use that reference earlier when we were talking about egregious bastards who obviously just got off and then bragged all the... Because he's obviously the ultimate example, isn't he? I know.
Yeah, allowed on Twitter, of course.
Game I can't handle, because on Twitter he will, no joke, just say like stupid comments that are so dunkable from the fact that someone can go, "Didn't you murder someone?" Like he just get all day. Like, he must just not read his replies, because all day long he's just getting dunked on. If people I've never seen, it's so ridiculous. So, why he's on Twitter, I don't know.
So what he said at the start of the month, he was doing an interview, and he said this with a straight face, right? He said he doesn't go to LA anymore because he's scared he might run into the real killer, and he doesn't know if he'll be responsible for his actions.
The sad thing, though, this is the distinction I'll make. That is so egregious and ridiculous gaslighting that I almost like appreciate the effort that he's putting into the character at this point, Richard. Mate, he's about 30 years deep on this bullshit. Like, he's still not cracking the character. That's amazing, isn't it? I know.
I do think he's so much of a mad narcissist. Like, on his, if he gets like, if he doesn't die suddenly and he gets like a terminal illness, I fully think deathbed confession is 100%.
Oh, when he knows there's nothing, nothing
like,
can
literally with his
point.
last breath, he'll go, "I did do it, yeah, I got away with it too." See, and then shuffle off. But I just couldn't believe that. Like that's the level that he's on. But anyway, yes. You can distract from what the peanut gallery are talking about, and trust me, in esports, it's very fucking easy. Go look at TSM and their PR strategy. It don't take much. They can be banter rights on an issue and fuck up, and they just go, "But look at what Florin tweeted in 2020," or that's that. All their bullshit just fades into the background. I mean, they somehow managed to spin or fucking someone in a managerial position fucking the help
I know.
into being actually a good thing.
Oh no, they spell it like this, right? I'll do the same thing. We'll make it like what the abstract premise is, so it sounds more ridiculous. They literally had a scenario, TSM fans, where the president of their organization was fucking someone who they then hired to join the company. The same president then outed a bunch of private information about someone else's employment status to that employee and the entire internet by accident. And TSM fans really went like, are you just saying it all because she's a woman? And I was just sat like, what? This can't be real, surely. Like, and they were all like, because she's a woman in it.
Right, investigated it and found it wasn't a conflict of interest.
They all kept telling me that as well. The same fans, this is how you know they don't read. The same fans kept linking me to what Richard's referring to, where Riot found that there was nothing in the investigation. Go and see. They found there's nothing wrong with it. In the actual investigation ruling, it says we did not investigate their personal relationship. And the fans were linking me as going, look, they did investigate it and they're innocent. It's like, you actually can't beat someone. Essentially, the joke is you can't beat people who can't read, can you? Because there's no evidence you can show them.
You know, so anyway, I mean, look, so if Hunden does have that, he needs to fire off the salvos because that's the only thing that potentially saves him. And I'll also add, if it's true, it's probably the death of ESIC as an entity. Yeah. I mean,
coupled with the Australian bans getting overturned, that'll be the end.
Yeah. Because you can't. Right. We understand it's difficult. I understand it better than anybody else. Trying to clean up this shithole is ridiculous because it's like you come in with a hose, 8 hours of spraying shit off the walls, and you're literally watching people fling shit up the walls while you're spraying the fucking walls, and you come back in, and not only is there more shit on the walls, the next day there's more people flinging more shit, and they're telling you, it fucking stinks in here, Rich, and you go, my bad. You know, that's what you're up against when you try and deal with esports corruption. So I'm sympathetic, but equally, I can't think of a time. And keep in mind, I'm not a governing body, so it wouldn't even really matter anyway. But I can't think of a time where, like, I've told somebody, like, listen, I've got your bank of rights here. I'm putting out a story, and if you fucking deny it, I'll fucking wreck you 10 times. I can't, like, what the fuck? It's like, this is what happened. This is the public interest. This is how it has to go. This is how it has to play. Often, in fact, I've been pretty, I would say, sympathetic in the sense that I don't take relish in ending people's careers, but you have to understand their actions have brought them to that place, and I serve the realm, dare I say. So ESIC need to understand that's what they do. You are here to serve the realm. You're not here to lighten your workload with fucking threats. Like, that's outrageous. So I'm operating on the premise that Hunden's full of shit because he's given me absolutely nothing in the last 2 years.
The character, really, is he?
No. And this is another reason why, when you're getting broiled in what you don't want to use up all the goodwill early doors, which he absolutely has. So, but if I see anything to the contrary, and again, if Hunden watches this and watches the show, obviously pals, in the past, known him a long time. If he reaches out and shows me that evidence, I'll be the one to publish it. I'll run with it, So, but anyway, and then we are told that there's going to be more coming in the future. Apparently, there's going to be another update for the North American match fixing, in the not too distant future. But I don't know what that means. So that's where we're at with ESIC. That's all the ESIC news. And that brings us now to perhaps some slightly more tedious stories about nothing in particular. Let's talk. Complexity have appointed a new GM. If you saw that. A guy I'm sure Messioso.
Indeed.
A chap that, made his name as an ESL admin. And then obviously went and worked with North. He was at Refresh before that.
I remember at one point in time.
Handling some stuff on the operations at Blast. So he's a Swiss Army knife in esports. I've known him many years. Some ups, some downs, as always, with relationships in this space. Generally, I think he's a good dude.
He's all right.
Got no issues with him. And certainly think this is an interesting appointment, because what it suggests to me is that we might be getting to a place at Complexity where maybe Jason Lake's taking a bit more of a backward step.
Yes,
Which,
that's what it looks like.
yeah, I mean, you know, because obviously Jason's been very hands-on. He's always going to be the face of the org to some degree. But ever since the Dallas Cowboys move, he's worked incredibly hard. You know, we faced all sorts of unique challenges. The teams had to be, you know, all over the place in terms of geography. Also, complexity as a team that I don't think, you know, they could get a break if they want to. They've had to use stand-in after stand-in after
Yes.
stand-in. Config, the latest injury. They're using NATO suffix at the moment, which, trust me, no matter what Reddit says, that's far from fucking ideal.
Think how unlucky that is. You only just made your massive fucking roster move, and then your star player smashes his wrist, potentially never to return. Like, give me a break. No, I agree. Like, after all the bad luck they've had, it's pretty ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, but you know, I'll add that you know, I think if Jason does take a backward step, because he's the living, beating heart of the team, and has obviously been very hands-on in almost every move they've made, including starting at the inception of the Juggernaut, as they were called. I think the org definitely loses something. No disrespect to Messi, also, of course, but I think it's interesting that, you know, they brought in a coach. They've had a coach before. And this is specifically a general manager, so we know that the responsibilities are going to be more, and perhaps even dealing with things like transfers and whatnot. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that and the direction it might take complexity in.
I'm certainly interested in it because, yeah, as you've sort of alluded to, this isn't a move, as far as I can tell, where you're just hiring just another warm body to just do whatever behind the scenes. This sounds like you're hiring the guy, and the way you're announcing it, like he's going to actually have input potentially in the Counterstrike team, as you're saying. And I think if you look at complexity at the moment, I personally got the vibe from Jason Lake that because he's kind of an old school esports guy, that he does it like a lot of the other teams, where basically he has his guy, and in this case, it's almost certainly Blame F if you just look at the makeup of the team. Blame F's his guy, and he has his powwows with Blame F, and then from that you make your roster moves. Well, part of the problem is listen, that's all well and good, and a lot of people in esports do that. Like, that's what people like Jack from Cloud9 do. A lot of people like that hands-on approach, but I do think long term it doesn't work, because it means as the owner you're having to take considerable amount of time out of your fucking day to run one of your teams. Even if that's your flagship team, that's too much. Like, eventually you've got to delegate. You've got to find someone who either shares your vision, or you just trust that they are legit, and they've got to take over and do that job for you. And in this particular case, I've said it before, and sadly fucking Counterstrike didn't ruin it for everyone, but we need to have real general managers, people who know the space, know the players, and can actually start doing these jobs. Because like I've always said, in the future, the idea is you won't be cutting and firing the players specifically. You fire your general manager, he did a bad job, right? I'll bring in the next guy who has the vision for the team, and then he builds it up, etc. So that is the future of Counterstrike and esports, in my opinion, especially with these enormous buyouts, all these fucking like the fact that essentially nowadays you can't even just use your eye test. You have to sort of like know things like, oh, this guy actually is like behind the scenes going to be the next guy. Like, you've got to be really hooked into your space. Like, it's not a space, unfortunately, for people of like the ownership position of Jason Lake. Like I said, they're overqualified for it, so they've got to move past that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, look, well, I think Jason as well. Like, you know, he's someone who definitely deserves a fucking break or a backward step. You know, like, there's a lot of esports owners and people that have come into the space, and you know, they do 2 or 3 years of hard graft and build something up, and then they sell it on, and they just count the money. You know, Jason's been in the fucking trenches longer than me and you. I mean, I think Jason was there like right at the fucking start of CS in North America.
Maybe like 2003 or 4, so a couple of years after me.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm trying to think, when was the first? Because he was a player first, right? I mean, he came in on the first.
He was playing, like, basically, the team originally was like a vanity project for him to just for fun play the game, but he wasn't like a good player, and they were at like the main level or some open level or some shit. And then what happened is when they gradually, like, he just initially as a fun thing paid like a few pros to like ring a bit, and then he sort of thought, well, what if I gradually built this? And then it became a team. So a couple of years after me, but it's still very, very early on in the context.
Right, there you go.
Of course, yeah, he's an OG.
Yeah. So the idea, you know, that you know, this is a guy that hasn't like earned a fucking early retirement, so to speak. You know, fucking hell. Like, if he doesn't
for at this point in time, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe it is a sign he's taking a backward step. He's got a family as well, obviously. You know, I mean, esports is a 24/7 job. Everyone's always talking about that. So, but yeah, I mean, I hope Messi
win.
Yeah, I hope.
Father, good.
Yeah,
I can go see him.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just wanted to bring back Glenn Ross again
because it's just in my brain now from last episode.
Yeah, but like I think Messi also he seems to be put together. He's been around a long time as well. So hopefully it brings good things for Complexity, and they can get a run of luck where they're not having to use fucking stand-ins at every major tournament. Might be next year now, but we'll wait and see. So you have that now. Deep law, of course, on By the Numbers. We've talked for a long, long time about Nico on this. He's the next one, by the way, because if you think about it, we've had GB James on the show, we've had Smoothie on the show. I'm trying to think. We haven't had D-Man yet. Wouldn't hold my breath for that one. But we always start off adversarial with some people. Peacemaker's another one. And we always bring them back.
I don't know where you think you go with this, but I don't imagine. I'm just going to go ahead and say, personally, I don't think there's a By the Numbers episode coming up in the future featuring Nico. I don't think that appearance is ever happening, personally.
Listen, me and him have talked. I've said to him.
Here's the problem, Richard, right? I'll put all cards on the table here. Right. I'm not exaggerating. I genuinely think, by the way, I'll give you the whole deal since it's By the Numbers. If I really wanted it was my number one desire in this world, I'm willing to bet you money I could literally get Carlos from G2 to arrange for me personally to do an interview with Nico, to do an interview with Reckless, and by the way, he would go and he would arrange these things because I know he has the gift of gab where he'd know how to talk these guys, or I'd ask him to do it as a favour to me or whatever. We could do this, but here's what fans don't get is in the case when it's someone like Nico has to actually want it as well. I don't want him to just be forced to do it or something. That's just garbage, and at that point in time, it's not even that for fun. It's like you're saying, he has to actually have redeemed himself. He has to have come full circle and realised the value of it, essentially, doesn't he? That's my point.
Yeah, so, me and him had a chat. I can't remember when this was. It was a while back. And I think we had a chat. I'd said it, I think it was when you tweeted out about that money that he owed you from that bar tab.
Because I said he owed you and me. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I've said it before. Like, I've fucking, if we wanted to go through and fucking play fucking Billy bar tabs, everyone in esports would I can retire on that money. The only thing I'm good for is sticking it behind the bar. So whatever, who gives a fuck? But anyway, so he messaged me about that and was like, "Listen, I'll give you the money if you want me." And I said, I don't give a fuck about any of that. We had a bit of small talk, and I said to him, "Look, what you need to do is you need to stop letting things happen to you and stop letting all of these narratives come tumbling out like 6 months down the road. You need to sit down with a credible journalist who knows what to ask you and can do follow-up questions and actually is engaged with what you're saying and can add context to what you're saying and call you out and has enough stones to call you out on your bullshit.
Yes.
And show the real Nico from your perspective. Yep. Because all we have is the clear evidence of what you're doing. And in the same way, for example, when I interviewed Smoothie and we talked about how he left Big, and he talked about essentially the tantrum that sparked off the whole chain of events, it was predicated on, a position on Mirage, basically. He didn't want to play. They weren't playing him on the window, they were playing him short, and he was getting wrecked, and he was going, "This doesn't fucking work. I'm an AWPer, I'm a good AWPer, I should be in fucking window." So it set off this whole chain of events. Now that's an interesting little bit of information that might make some people more sympathetic to Smoothie because you think he's got a point. But equally, I'm from the mindset you do what your IGL says, and if you don't want to do that, you don't play in the team. But whatever. So when have we ever heard Nico's actual perspective on why he does the things he does, why he sets the standards he does? We never hear about it. And he probably, you're right, I don't think he understands the value of it. But I guarantee if he did it, he would get it.
It would get way more popular as well instantly.
Yes.
The dumbest thing about him as well is one. This is, by the way, it's the exact. It's so crazy that Carlos has both these guys in esports right now because it's the same exact story with Reckless. By the way, if people are League of Legends fans, they'd know this is the case. If this guy ever actually, like you're saying, just took control of the narratives of his career, they've both already got the legendary careers where every fan they want you to be right, you dumb fuck. They want to have a reason to believe that you are like not a total douchebag. They want to believe that like there's a good reason that you did so. So all you have to do is give them the reason. By the way, it doesn't even matter if it totally vibes that we might not agree, but as he's saying, your fan is he's waiting halfway to where you are now, just saying, give me a reason to come on your side, just give me any reason, but you don't do it. And if you think like you're saying here, because both those people bizarrely do have this hubris where they think, well, I'm above that and I won't go down to go. Well, in that case, don't complain when the people who do work with those narratives fucking wreck you, because you essentially just said you get to win. You just gave in, didn't you? Because I agree, mate. There's nothing a player has more, especially a good player, has more power over than these narratives. Like they think we craft them and we like destroy them. No, literally, this happens to me. If someone like Reckless actually chooses to address the topic, it undoes 1,000 things I do. You can easily turn that tide tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, and so the thing was it was an amicable.
And let me throw one other thing out there. I'll even say this as well. In every case where I ever did interview someone like you're talking about, even when it was a friend of mine, usually in the interview you do find some angle even you didn't know about, and you're like, oh, actually, I never actually understood that concept. Even we would find some shit out, of course.
Yeah, and so like what you have to think about is there is an aspect about Nico's career that we don't know anything about, and yet we're trucking on here in CS, and he's got an interesting and storied career, and yet the one voice that's missing is his own.
Yep,
because he seems content to just be right in his mind and never have to clarify himself to anybody.
Here's the problem, Richard. He does this thing, which is why he ends in this cycle, especially with me, where on the one hand, he's not some try-hard loser, Richard, who cares about like shit like esports and Twitter and stuff. So why would he care to address this topic? But then he is incredibly butthurt and sensitive about people addressing that topic and using Twitter. It's like, mate, you can't have your cake and eat it on this one. Like by the way, it obviously affects you. I get that. Yeah. But that's why I'm saying the actual measure to solve that is to get involved and basically make it work for you. Because it's actually going to torture you to pretend to be above it all and be too cool. But it clearly gets to him. Dude, this is the guy where like normally I would say it's nonsense when fans think that like chanting or make. Dude, he was fucking annoyed when those Cloud9 fans started. When they were chanting Nico's tilted, he was obviously tilted off the face of the fucking planet. So trying to play it that like, you're like the stoic cool guy, you aren't. I'm afraid that just ain't you. And no one's buying it either. That's the other thing.
Well, yeah, because again, there's all this overwhelming evidence. You can't dispute the evidence, but what you can do is give your perspective or add a little detail that changes it, right? And so with all of that in mind, like I said, we ended that conversation and it was amicable, but I could also tell he did feel that if he did an interview with me or an interview with you, he'd be giving us something. And there's enough of a grievance there that he doesn't want to do that. So I even said, I'll recommend like another journalist I think can do a good job.
Yeah.
Like I'll happily connect you with. There's other people out there that could do an in-depth interview with you, on a podcast, and it would work. But we just never picked it up from that point. But I would urge him because, and you're probably thinking, why the fuck are you talking about Nico? Well, first of all, and we're not going to get into this now because we're going to leave ESL Pro League till next week. 50% of the tournament will be down by then. We'll have enough to talk about. But I've been saying for ages, G2 don't make changes. They're on the precipice of winning something. I felt vindicated. They've been getting better and better. They've been third all this time. Then they've just had a second place. You're like, right, okay. The next one's the first place. And then they've come into the CSL Pro League, and it's a fucking disaster. They're currently, at the time of recording this, losing to Forza. They're already out in groups. They haven't won a single game. They lost to Sinners, who, off the basis of that victory, I think have jumped up to number 20 in the world, but I don't think they were coming into the tournament. Indeed, I think they were only there by virtue of having won ESEA Premier last season.
Right.
So certainly not one of the favourite teams. And indeed, everyone was raving, going, maybe Sinners are good. They've got Oscar, who knows? Czech has been slept on for ages. They haven't won another game since in that group. So you know, G2 are going to make changes. It's there. I guarantee it. I know too much about Nico. So this is another good time to go and do it, brother, because you're about to drop Nexa or something insane and install yourself as God Emperor. So before you do that, sir, get right with the PR side of this and sit down with a journalist to explain it all. For fuck's sake. Or your legacy is just going to be, as soon as the going gets tough, he loses his fucking mind. And you don't want that. Now, the whole Nico monologue is because there was a story that came out. It was transcribed over on Deserto by Lewis Mira, our new editor, that we took from HLTV. And we've talked about this very scenario. We've done it loads on the Deep Law. God Emperor Nico, and how we brought Coldzera over to FaZe. And then he fucking betrayed him and left him. You know, he did a full fucking about turn. You should never have trusted me, Coldzera. And off he's gone. Right? Coldzera, another player who, by the way, would benefit from sitting down. I know he does this a lot with Brazilian media.
Get it, mate. These guys, it's like I say, dude, it's one thing if you're, here's the thing, right? If you're Hunden, listen, not you weren't that loved anyway, you know, like people vaguely care about you. These people, Coldzera, Nico, mate, you could trip over, do an interview and just be loved because everyone wants to like you because how good you are at the game, you dumb fuck.
Yeah.
You're going to already get leeway.
So, you know, that has to be part of what you do as a player. Like, you've got to understand the media aspect because trophies are part of your legacy, stats are part of your legacy, you know, fucking all your achievements. But equally as well, people are going to want to, at some point, they're going to want to de-weave all the mystique around the player. Who was he? And not just the player, what about the man? And so by not recording things in the moment, you're letting future sports historians that might want to talk about, you might not even be worth talking about. You might be but a footnote. Who knows? I'd say Coldzera is probably going to be remembered as more than a footnote. And so as a result, where's your engagement with Western media so we can go and look? Well, in 2015, he said this just before his big move. And in 2017, he said this. And in 2018, we've only got breadcrumbs, and most of it, the vast majority of it, unfortunately, is in the Brazilian speaking media, and that means even in translation you're going to lose something. So you owe it to yourself to spread yourself around, do as much as you can. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of this up is that Coldzera did do one of these interviews because obviously he's considering, you know, he's out of FaZe essentially and considering offers. And he said exactly what we talked about. He said that I got really carried away by my friendship with Nico on FaZe and I decided to join them very quickly. So in other words, he jumped the gun. And he said, we didn't win as many times as we thought, but it was a really great experience. And I improved as a human being and not just a player. Now, obviously, that's something you just say at the end. You never just improve as a player. You always improve as a human being. You've got to...
The guy who goes the other way. He goes, the thing was, we had some great success at Lord's Blast, but I'm actually a much worse human being now. And if anything, I'll probably be a moron in a year from now. I'd like to hear that angle. That'd be a fresh one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I realised being a piece of shit works. But yeah, so...
to the end of the Hunden interview, but, you know, certainly get those headlines, won't it?
So I thought this was amazing because it just literally confirms pretty much how that entire move happened.
Also, phrasing, I got carried away with my friendship with Nico. Oh, Mr. Nico, oh, your friendship.
I know.
Give me a break.
No, but I think it's actually spot on.
Jane Austen novel. This is garbage. What is this?
You know, because essentially what he's saying there is that he made the decision to move just predicated on the opportunity to play with Nico. And we all know Nico on the other side had said he always wanted to play with Coldzera because there was no other player that reminded him of himself as much as Coldzera did.
Which is really no joke, like almost his real reasoning as to why.
I'm pretty sure he's on record having said that, isn't he?
No, but it's just the most, like, even though it's unintentional, it's just the most fucking narcissistic statement.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's like, you know what, the thing about you is, you're brilliant. Almost like me. Me of me, not quite as good as me, but if I couldn't get me, I'd want you. Me.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, but it's like you know what it's like when someone tries to pay you a compliment by saying I see so much of myself in you. Yes. Like, Fucking hell, mate. Go talk to the mirror, dickhead. You're meant to be paying me a compliment, not yourself, you fucking arsehole. People do that all the time. People do that. I see so much of me and you. That phrase, anyone who utters that phrase when they're trying to pay you a compliment, just phase them out of your fucking life, mate. It's all about them. You know, fucking get on with your shit. But anyway, so it confirms that basically that move was all predicated on that relationship, and obviously sounds reading between the lines as well after the fact. He probably feels a little bit aggrieved that he was left kind of holding the ball because, you know, what FaZe could have been if it had been a functional version of FaZe, especially if, let's say, Nico had stuck around long enough to make, you know, basically if Nico's relationship with Carrigan didn't break down. You know, who knows what could have happened.
The number one team right now, realistically, with those pieces, it could be
think so.
One. Yeah,
you really would think so. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Now, the other little tidbit of information that came in that interview was, and again, this is where it's so quintessentially called Zera, is he said, "Oh, I've had about, I don't even know, 8 to 12 offers like, from all over the world." I'm like, mate, there's no
universities had 8 offers.
Yeah,
to get 12, there's no way it's 8. Come on.
Yeah, it's like in this market, mate.
Unless he's being really disingenuous to, like, as in, if some guy from like if Bad News Bear said, "We'll have you as well," called it, that doesn't count as an offer. That does not count as an offer right now. Like, get that fucking offer out of this. Because when he says that, the implication is like real offers that you'd consider. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was just, you know, mind blowing.
Mate, there's no way you're getting that many offers. There's no way. No way. You got 2 offers, if I have to guess.
So he says he's going to be back in action soon. Raises more questions. I know we talked about it a little bit last episode. I mean, do you see a likely destination for Cold Zero?
Unless it is the whack-ass Team Liquid one. I don't know who. Basically, the only 2 teams that make sense on paper is Furia, just because they're Brazilian, and he was a great Brazilian player once upon a time, and then Team Liquid because of the Fallen/Stewie connection. So if it's not those 2, I can't imagine where it is, because the problem is, like I've said on past shows, either the team itself will be too good for Cold Zero, in which case why they're recruiting him, or they won't have enough money for him. Like, listen, by the way, I will say this: if he actually ends up joining a team and I'll find out he is taking a small salary, I'll have mad respect for him. I just can't believe that at this point in his career, especially knowing how people like him and Fall and do shit, that they're going to possibly go down in salary. As I think they've done that thing, sadly, where they have attached their ego to how high the number is. It has to always be that high, you know.
Do you think there's a world where G2, having shit the bed in the ESL Pro League, make changes in Nico and Cold Zero in? And that's why he said...
That would be so egregious. That would be so egregious, though.
Coming soon, a Danish league. So
do you think is this something that's even on the table, you think?
No, I can't believe it. I mean, reading behind the fucking scenes, I mean, like, apparently the Cold Zero was legit pissed off. I mean, like, I've heard that.
Oh,
I've heard when Nico bounced, he was like, really?
I get it, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't even know what their relationship's like right now. But also, what better way to fucking fix that problem if you're Nico and you do, for some reason, legitimately, like, you're still doing the Wolverine meme, fucking, like, looking at fucking Cold Zero while you're getting banged out in the ESL Pro League. What better way to fucking fix it and run it back? I don't see Carlos making a move for a 26-year-old, you know, I don't want to call him a has-been. I think that's too disrespectful. But, you know, he's not the player he was.
Yes.
And I still admire his drive, and I still admire him as a competitor.
I think he has another problem as well that people don't think about, which is this. One of the things we always gave him praise for, and his teams, is they did look like in those teams they were totally built around him and his style of play. Well, I will say that doesn't fucking work anymore when you aren't the best player on the team or in the world. Like, we can't build the whole team around you. So one of my problems with bringing him into any team is people are in their brain thinking, right, well, if I bring him in, the hope is I get 2017 Cold Zero, right? I get that guy back. The problem is I don't even know if you ever could get that player again. Like, to me, I think he could resurrect his career. I think because for me, the key thing is not only did he have an amazing work ethic, but he was also, as far as I can tell, in the game, seemed like quite an intelligent player. Listen, you don't have to have raw skill. You can just play off those qualities. You could be a very competent role player or like 2nd or 3rd star. And yeah, he could be a good player still. I just don't think, personally, I don't think you're ever going to see the old Cold Zero again. It's too many years now, isn't it? So the problem is he does seem to do that thing, though, where when he does his negotiations, he seems in his brain to think he's the old Cold Zero. That's what I'm worried about, mate. So I think if he joins G2, they have to make the whole team around him then. It has to be him and Nico, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I don't think that's anything to worry about if you're a G2 fan, but you never know. I mean, like G2 as well, they do like players that have social media presence and big followings. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But I agree. I think Carlos is a savvy guy, but I'm just at the stage now where I do think changes are coming, and it just sort of made me laugh that there's fucking Cold Zero
I'm
saying,
instantly interested in
yeah,
it.
yeah. I used to be such good friends with Nico, and I've had a ton of offers, and it's like they're fucking shit in the bed. And if Nico still, because again, one thing that we've identified with Nico is if you're a player he rates, the reality doesn't matter.
Oh no, exactly.
He'll do everything he can at an org to bring you in. He'll use it. He's got no qualms about using his star player status to inform roster moves. So it's not. It's one of those things. It's probably like a 5% chance, but CS is so fucking mental right now. Don't rule it out. There you go. That's it. Bit of a slow news week. Really, nothing happening. As I said, we'll get into ESL Pro League, provided nothing crazy happens over the course of the week. I imagine that'll be the big main thrust of all of the talking points next time. And so with that, we segue with trepidation into our viewer questions. And again, if you support us on the Patreon that we have, $50 will get you a question. I keep meaning to do with the stretch goals, but Sam's too stoned to remind me. I'm too lazy to do it. Actually, not really lazy. We're always working hard. Sam's lived with me now. He can testify to that. He's seen it. Seen how hard I work of an evening. And obviously, Duncan just doesn't give a shit or want you to get any more value for your money because it all goes on his big pile that he rides around on like Smaug. So, with that said, first question. Zumba asks, who is the more mysterious pro player, Dozier or Darian?
Oh, right. If people don't know, the person it's also another Russian player, funnily enough. In League of Legends, there was a player who played for the Legends. He actually was on Gambit as well. And basically, this guy was just like the weirdest player ever, as in, like, his whole playing style didn't make sense. Everything he said in interviews was like, it's kind of like a bit like Dozier, except the difference was this guy was like already leaning into the meme from like day one, whereas Dozier, I think, only found out like years later that it was like actually a meme. Like, I mean, he probably thought he just had a problem with alcohol. He's gradually, getting in worse shape. But turns out that's hilarious in the West. That's actually called marketing and branding. No, basically, here's the problem. As much as the Darian guy was very weird and all stuff, no one will ever be able to beat Dozier because of the story that Olaf Meister told. That Dozier himself would go around, so this to me, come up to you while drunk speaking English and then refuse to either speak English or acknowledge that he even knows you when sober, like some sort of fucking insane Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type scenario that I don't even really understand how it would apply to esports. And so like that alone is mental because that's like some Andy Kaufman level shit, like, which by the way, I actually think is really whack. Like, if people don't know, if you're a young person, you probably think what Andy Kaufman did was really funny and clever and edgy. Shut the fuck up, quit sixth form and understand he was just being a wanker to a load of people in a really annoying way that wasn't actually it was one of those jokes that ain't really worth the payoff, is it? So what you've gone through and put me through isn't worth the payoff. So that's the problem in that scenario. Like, basically it's got to be Dozier because it's just like, to this day, I've even known loads of his teammates. I feel like he's one of those people, the more you find out, the more mysterious he becomes.
Exactly.
It never like demystifies. It becomes more appealing and incredible the more you find out about him.
Yeah, I was going to say Dozier as well, because it's like each time you learn like a detail, it sort of raises more questions, like all the mad stories that we hear like behind the scenes and all the things he said, and you sort of don't really know anything about who the guy is or how he sort of confers this like mass psychosis on groups of people, where it's like he's so well regarded by every player despite not being able to speak. Like, he can't communicate with them, but somehow everyone's drawn to him. Everyone loves him. He's also a really affable guy, considering he barely speaks a word of English. And then, like you say, you'll just hear some mad story, like, he made a ton of money with this, and his wife's his childhood sweetheart. And
here's the irony. I said earlier, Nico tries to play that he's the cool, playboy that doesn't care what the bloody media and all those nerds think online, but he just doesn't pull it off because he obviously does care, right? What people don't know is Dozier is that person, for real. Like, Dozier actually either thinks it's mildly funny that we all make these memes, or he genuinely doesn't give a flying fuck. Like for example, he isn't, by the way, I've no doubt people think about what the CIS scene's like. People have told him the jokes I've made about him, and me and Richard have 100%. He doesn't give a fucking fuck, guys. He's chill as fuck. He doesn't care. He really is genuinely a guy who just doesn't care.
Yeah, and that
is fair play. I've very rarely ever met people like that.
Well, you know what I would probably say, and again, this is like the thing that I always hate when people do it, but I'm about to do it. You know, trying to get in his mind, you know, and sort of for me, based on what I do know, which is very little, you know, this is obviously someone that recognizes what a fantastic opportunity. Not only esports has been for him, but also having notoriety within it, right? And in that sense, you know, let's not forget, right? He has been a really good player in his career. That's you know that often gets forgotten about because
unfortunately,
you know, all of the memes. It's overshadowed. I mean, again,
if people don't know, there was legitimately a time span. It was the last couple of years of 1. So I'm going to say like last 3 years of 1.6, and then let's say like the first 2 years of CSGO. He was literally the best player in Russia in Counterstrike.
Yes.
And was one of the best players in the world in 2 games, 1.6 and CSGO. Like this guy had a very solid period. It's just unfortunately, yeah, obviously the last few years he's just been a meme, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, people forget that. So he's already got a fantastic career to talk about if you just wanted to talk about that and knew nothing else. But I think when the memes started coming, you know, he was happy to lean into that. You know, happy to play up to being the ex-god. And as we've said on this very show, I think it's even on a best to buy the numbers. The running joke, obviously, with the whole sex god thing is actually that he's not particularly attractive. And so we pretend he is.
In fact, is the juxtaposition.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's actually...
The joke essentially is, look what a sex god this guy is, because, of course, nobody would ever actually want to have sex with him. And he just goes, brilliant, can I have more money? Here's what's mad. In the CIS region, in a weird way, they almost do get how stupid and ephemeral fame is. Because, for example, it's also the same thing if people don't know with Zeus. Like, I'll tell you a very interesting detail people don't think about with the relationship between me and Zeus. Zeus might tweet and say stupid shit, but what's mad is... Dude, he never unfollows me on Twitter. He'll even retweet some of the stuff. He almost gets the game. He reminds me of when, like, I'm sorry to fucking really blow people's minds with some fucking kayfabe level shit here. But you know when you hear stories that, like, Kim Kardashian will just have her people contact the paparazzi to meet her at a specific place, to do a specific photo op, but looking like she's just being paparazzi'd. It's almost like these guys get that. They're the actually only people I've seen in Counterstrike who get this angle that, like, sometimes all publicity is good publicity, you know?
Yeah, but it's also, you know, I think it's that, like, it would be if you were essentially making money by being the butt of the jokes, right? Like, I know a lot of people that just breaks down. I mean, you can go and look in fucking, you know, comedians that, you know, had to play them bumbling moron, you know, to a well-liked
This happened with me when I did my show. This is not a joke. The real reason why I had to stop my League of Legends show, Listen Local, where me and the guy Loco Doco was my host, was because even though he kept telling me, Richard, even privately, like he was totally fine with it and he understood it was all justified, I know this guy in real life. I could see it was actually hurting his feelings that he had to be the guy getting wrecked in all the dynamic. That I was always the one who was making the funny comment and he was getting dude, I could tell it was hurting him, so I had to just stop it. I can't keep doing this, mate. Even if you say it's fine, there's almost some fucked up toxic relationship when you're telling me it's fine. I can see it ain't fine.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, it wears people down. You know, you hear about it fucking, you know, a gasket blows out and or they're an alcoholic behind the scenes or whatever. You know, what I'll say about Doja is he's recognized that, listen, this is an unbelievable opportunity for me from where I'm from. I'm unbelievably, like, privileged and made all this money. I've had all these opportunities, sponsorship deals because of that mimetic quality to my career. Why the fuck wouldn't I lean into this, even if it's something that on the surface could be hurtful? I'll be frank with you, you know, as a larger gentleman myself, my head couldn't cope with that. I couldn't cope with being the running joke being you are physically repulsive. Like, that is, you know, 4 years, you know, and then you think about, like, you know, JW went through a fraction of that with the pig thing and sort of like diffused it by leaning into it. But I also guarantee, probably on some level, he's thinking, fucking hell, like,
oh, it's fucked up, yeah, of course.
Yeah, because you're hitting people in an aspect they can't change. Like, sure, you can lose weight or whatever, but if you've got a pig nose, you've got a pig nose. Like, that's genetic. No, legit, dude. What are you gonna do? Have surgery or something?
I'm just thinking through all the years, the fucking the English sentences that come into my ears. Like, I'm just sitting here now. If you got you've got a pig nose. You got a pig nose.
No, but listen as well. To be I know we're not being serious, but I'm going to try and be serious, right? No, but like, obviously, if you go and read about it, like, the rise of like steroid abuse, the rise of men with eating disorders and psychological problems related to body image, but the rise of body dysmorphia in men. It's like it was a problem that we sort of compartmentalized and
right
sort
on
of,
that level,
and we said, oh, you know, only women worry about this. Us guys, no one cares. Like, you know, but like as you know, younger generations come through and everything you do is digital and image becomes more and more important as an aspect of that, we are seeing a really underreported and underserved amount of problems. So nothing but respect for anyone that's got the mental fortitude to sort of be able to take that emotional baggage on and essentially convert it into longevity of their career and money making opportunities, because I certainly consider myself being mentally strong. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could make my image the joke. I don't know. I don't know if I could do that personally. So I think he's a fantastic guy, and certainly, you know, I don't begrudge him a single moment of his success. But I would love to get to know him better.
I would love a documentary about him, a real one with like Russian people who know the shit. Oh, I'd love to watch it.
Someone has to make that.
Yes.
You know. No more gimmicks, no more ex-God. Who was the real fucking Doja? Like, because, you know, how much do we know?
Absolutely.
Jerky's Minion asks, what is your favourite Deftones song? I believe this will be for me. I guess I can discount you. You're not a Deftones fan. I don't think that's your particular genre.
Like some of the stuff in like the 90s, like fucking whatever it was, like Back to School or whatever. That was a pretty good song.
Yeah, well, that's not going to make the cut for me. It's kind of hard because when you ask what's your favorite song from a band with such like a massive back catalogue, because they've been going for years now, it's like they have different sounds, different eras, so and also it's all tinged with nostalgia, so it's when it hits you, right? Like probably getting a bit old to fucking be in a mosh pit. But I probably would say there's a couple, like, it blows my mind that there's a song called Teething, which they put out on the Crow. It was the sequel, I think. But it was out. They put that out on a Crow sequel soundtrack. And it's like an unbelievable song, and people have just forgotten about it entirely because it wasn't on one of their albums. It was like a throwaway. But you probably got to pick something from White Pony that still remains there.
That
like
comic one, right?
Yeah, mate, I literally listened to the entirety of White Pony twice through just the other day, just chilling, doing some typing, and it's still one of the best rock albums ever recorded. It's 21 years old. They did a 20th anniversary remix album I didn't even know about. Which is obviously isn't as good, but White Pony is just one of the best rock albums ever recorded, and I think it'll still sound fresh and awesome in 20 more years. But
What's the best track off that then?
You see,
there's a bunch you can go, right? Like there's fucking.
For me, I was going to say it's probably Passenger. I think Passenger. The reason, exactly, because Maynard James Keenan's there, and it's obviously it was recorded in 2000, so it's not, you know, more ballady, whimpery Maynard James Keenan. All due respect to like Perfect Circle fans or whatever, but you know, it's the fucking Tool Maynard James Keenan coming in and absolutely fucking slamming it. And it's an unbelievable vocal performance. And you don't get a lot of like male-on-male duets anymore. You know, back in the 90s, they used to record whole albums around that motherfucking stuff. You know, think about like Temple of the Dog and stuff, you know, and all of that stuff. You know, it was like, yeah, let's fucking throw people together. Let's throw two singers together and see what the fuck comes out. But you don't really do that anymore. And so obviously having Chino Marino and Maynard James Keenan going against it, the riff is absolutely unbelievable. The lyrics are fucking fantastic. It's got a great hook, great chorus. It's just a fantastic song, you know, but on an album full of fantastic songs, because they're all bangers, mate. They are all bangers, like on that album. So, probably my opinion. Hope that answers your question, Jerky. Orky, your home cities are preparing to bounce back post-COVID with innovative advertising to bring in that fat tourist money, but they know they must stand out. As such, they have enlisted the two of you to come up with a creative new campaign to bring in the younger crowd that is your core audience. They know traditional rules need not apply. They need the gritty truth that can bring in young men and women with spare cash. What sort of approach, campaign and or slogan would you come up with to advertise where you live?
I mean, problem is I've got it on easy mode. I live in fucking Amsterdam, couldn't I? So obviously I'd just go with some edgy, like Counterstrike related thing, like smoke mid. Nah, smoke the top grade. Shit, you bitch. Or something.
Yeah,
It's
for me,
edgy and down with the kids and like, you bitch. Just put that in. I know.
yeah. I don't even know because like I live in Birmingham now, so like we built a fucking monorail, which is like such a meme.
That is like some out of The Simpsons, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's totally like
I can't handle it.
When I flew out to America, they were like, right, we're knocking down Corporation Street. We're going to completely revolutionise Birmingham City Centre. I got back. There's Corporation Street still mostly standing, and there's a fucking monorail that just runs between, as far as I can tell, a bus station and a train station. It's not even. It's just to stop heifer-sized people from walking, as far as I can tell. There's no actual benefit to it, and now they're threatening to fucking expand it. So I don't know. There you go. We've got a monorail. How about that? Can't argue with that one. Yeah.
That's unique. Not many people have that.
No, they don't. So sorry, it was the answers to the question was short.
No, you have to go. Remember, you have to make it edgy down with the kids. So here's one: sick of getting railed and getting mono. Come on our monorail.
Not bad.
A little bit unnecessarily sexually provocative there, but you know, it's whatever.
Yeah,
trying to get down with them kids, innit?
Why not?
Allegedly.
I mean, I'm calling it a monorail. I am actually realising I am just sort of describing a slightly elevated tram line. So it's not even a real... Because the monorail is one of those cool ones, isn't it, that like hangs off a rail. But this is more just like sort of a shit train. So it's not even really a monorail. It's on one rail. I mean, whatever. Fuck it. We don't have a monorail. Bad news. I don't know. Anyway, Chingu. I remember Richard saying he was really disappointed in Shroud because of how much untapped potential he had. What are some players in any esports title who you were disappointed in not living up to what they could?
I missed the name. Who was disappointed in Shroud?
Me, apparently.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of wasted potential in CS from North America, I mean...
Oh, I would agree, absolutely. Especially because, again, sadly with him, people don't know, like, the first, like, year or so of his career, he was a very good player. It's just that after that, he himself became, like, a meme, didn't he? So... Yeah, I would agree. He absolutely missed his potential. If anyone ever watched him on his stream, he obviously had mad fucking skills, but in Counter-Strike, he was just whack for a few years. He was just like an average fucking or below average pro. And what was the question? Who else is there we really disappointed in?
Yeah, in any game, who you most disappointed in?
Oh, most. Yeah, let's go with most. Let's try and find the biggest one. Let me think. Fuck. Because I can probably just stay in Counter-Strike. There'll be a bunch. Like, I have to say, in Counter-Strike, the ones that always really disappoint me are the people where, like, just based on eye test and things you hear, like they really could have been the absolute best. They could have been like the greatest player. So there's a few that I can think of. Like in 1.6, for example, there was a Norwegian player called Real who, like, put it this way, he was so good. People like fucking Khan and Forrest were trying to like recruit him to a Swedish team, and he's Norwegian. Remember, in like Sweden has like unlimited players.
Didn't play in CGS, but he was signed to CGS. He was a sub.
So someone like him, someone where, as far as I know, actual raw ability, like he really could have like been the best ever. But he was one of those guys where not only did he not actually like work that hard, but then eventually just drifted off and being a poker pro because it's just less work, as mad as that sounds. So people like that are the ones that always kind of like either infuriate me or like fascinate me. It's why, if people don't know, the main reason I was always so interested in Device is exactly because he choked. It's like he was so clearly a mega player, but then there's this one element that's just preventing you from succeeding all the time. So people like that are the ones that tend to stand out for me. If I'm trying to think of more recent ones, because the problem with that was such an old reference, people like, I'm trying to think of one for like CS. I'll give you one in CSGO that's disappointed me. An obvious one that always stands to mind for me is Phelps. Every time he fucking isn't in a fallen top team, he's fucking amazing. Like the eye test is like, this guy's skills are mental. How is he not? And yet you look at his career, he's somehow managed, no joke, to have that one good period in SK. Obviously, he was briefly in Immortals, and then he basically just swerved the rest of his career. Like, he didn't even end up in Furia. Someone made an entire second team that became really good in Brazil. He wasn't even part of it. It's like, I don't know how this guy zigged every time he should have zagged, but something was fucked up. And then the worst thing of all, and this is why I have to like put the pin on this guy's career, because he's never coming back, by the way. The worst thing of all was when I did ask people who'd been his teammates, they were like, oh yeah, and he also does have like a mild attitude problem. It's like, I'm out. Yeah,
exactly.
Do this.
Mild.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't do this, guys.
It's really hard because I'm trying to think, obviously, across the totality of every game that I've covered, and obviously CS is the biggest part of that. But There's got to be a good fucking shout in StarCraft or something. Shit. Really hard to say because, yeah, obviously disappointing is sort of relative to what they achieve, right? Like somebody who should have won all the championships, only getting 5, would you call him disappointing or not? Very hard. I mean, like the biggest one that immediately springs to mind in CS is obviously like you've got your Phelps. For me, Nex.
Oh, there was another classic one. If people don't know, for real, I'm not joking. If you took the person who worked with Nex, who was the most disappointed, they would also 1 second later tell you he had the best game I ever saw. Yeah. That's why it's so underwhelming. Because you have to understand, there's plenty of people publicly will lie about how good players are. But like in this scenario, even the people who actually didn't want to play with him were like, oh, he's insanely skilled. He just couldn't do it in the game,
Yeah. And you can probably speak a bit more to this. Obviously, I followed StarCraft 2 pretty extensively. I never really followed this, Brood War pre, how it intersected with StarCraft 2. That was sort of before my time and not really anything I was interested in beyond being a sort of, moron that, you're like David Beckham in Korea or whatever.
Yeah, exactly,
complete fabrications, of course.
Yeah.
But for me, and I have no idea if this is true, but it always felt that like, we were always looking for that great foreigner in StarCraft 2, and then sort of Stefano was it for a bit, and then
I know where you're going on this. Keep going.
Well, I was going to say Idra, honestly.
Oh, by the way, if people don't know, Idra's actual playing career in StarCraft 2 was mega underwhelming. He was basically like really good for about a year early in the game. And then right after that, he like stuck with the same style of play basically and refused to update his game. And his results just went like this down. And so the saddest thing is, you're right. Not only was he a very skilled player, he just refused to sort of like accept that you have to adapt. But even worse, he had everything in terms of like, if he'd have actually had the game to match it, he would have been the biggest player in the entire world of StarCraft. It would have been mental.
Yeah, so I mean, and again, like he was someone who was so cerebral, really understood it, could always articulate, had an unbelievable competitive spirit. Sometimes that worked against him. So it was a toss-up because when it was either him I would probably go for in StarCraft 2, just obviously in terms of Western players, or maybe Hook, who
that's another good one.
I feel when he had that move when he joined, it was Liquid, right? Was his big money move, I think, to the first dog.
Oh, right, he went to Liquid before that.
Yeah, he went, this is before he joined EG. I think he went to Liquid first. Yeah. So that was where, So I think that's where I first met him, just as he had that move. And obviously there's a lot of hype around him at that point. And it just, I don't know. We were always waiting for a Western, in particular a North American guy, honestly, is what the scene desperately needed. A North American dude that was capable of mixing it up with the Koreans. And like I say, the best we got in the early era in StarCraft 2 was like Stefano, who was obviously a phenom that actually did, go and, compete. Although, again, I've always had my suspicions. You could have probably asked a bit more from him, frankly, because he was such a party animal. But yeah, I'd probably say Idra overall. I always felt Idra was the guy. When I was watching his streams, I always, and he's battering everyone in solo queue. He's the guy I wanted to see go to a tournament and mess people up. I know where you were going, I think. Were you going to think Naniwa? Yeah.
Because I mean, you put him in that category because since he was a friend of mine, I can tell you, like all the stuff I've tried to explain in videos, interviews, it is just the case. This was a guy where basically it's like if Device never got over the choking issue totally. Like he sort of by the end got like most of it done, and he could come third or fourth again in the tournament. But put it this way, this guy won so few actual titles for how good he is. It's mental. Like he was genuinely against like top Koreans in like winning position in like semis and fight like so many times. It's ridiculous. Mate. He's one of those guys that comes second and third like a billion times in their career. So if people don't realize, like he actually could have like legit like won the biggest tournaments in the world. So yeah, that is disappointing because again, it's so rare as a foreigner you're ever going to have a chance to do that in a game where Koreans are the best. Like anyone you can get, it's going to be a handful of people. Those are your chances. You're not going to have 50 people and hope that they win against Koreans. It ain't going to happen, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he's probably the best shout, actually, thinking about it. I was at...
he was just a mega talented person, if you know him. Like, he's a very, very talented guy.
I know you were there too, but... no, that might have been the one you had to miss out. But I was at the Katowice where he had the fucking meltdown.
Oh no, that was the one where I had it. But here's the funny thing, Richard. Because I was mates with him, because he had the meltdown a day after I got fired, we just spent the whole tournament in my room watching the League of Legends tournament for like 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So
like we were just bonkered in there. Like, well, I even said to us, no point either of us going out, mate, just order food in and I like this is just stupid as fuck, in it like 3 days to go from home.
Because I was literally in the room when he lost his fucking mind. He was arguing with his managers and stuff. He'd gone, mate. He'd lost.
The problem is there's a context you wouldn't know, though, and nobody in the West knows this. And even worse, because they didn't know it, you might not know this, but because as a person, he could be a dickhead to a lot of people around him. He'd pissed off many of the foreign people, like the Hidden Control and all those people, that he didn't even have anyone who could go to bat with him on this. So what people don't know is this. What he was mad about was, in game 1 of his match at this tournament, he got scouted immediately by the player Paul, and so he thought, right, there's a sound leak, and he's heard the crowd shout when he scouted me, right? Here's what people don't know. And if you know this context, by the way, the reason I'm bringing this story up, Richard, is if Nico Coldier is watching, I'm about to show you how you make a terrible situation with no possible good reading sound 100 times more reasonable. Here's what people don't know, Richard. When Nanawa, like 2 years earlier, had been in Korea when he'd had those runs in GSL in the Code S, and at the time he was a non-Korean, he was making it to the playoffs, and he was playing against the best Korean players. No joke, and I've asked and looked around enough that this is legit as far as I can tell. This is how nationalistic Koreans are. Even though he was in a totally different Korean team house, practicing with who in theory should have been the rivals of the players he was playing in the main Korean competition, essentially, as far as we can tell, his own practice partners who were Korean just leaked all his strats to all the opponents that he was going to play. Because to them, it was more important that a Korean won than that their friend beat this guy that they're not even got a connection to aside from his Korean. So basically, if you know that's been done to you, Richard, then you're going to be mega paranoid about anything weird that happens in the game. Oh. So if you're in a game and someone instantly scouts you, you're going, what the fuck is going... I've had this happen to me before. Because basically, he told me, that like in one of those tournaments in Korea, he once had that happen where he came with like all these like strats that no one would know. And the motherfucker was like hard countering him just from the builds, which means that they just know what you're doing in the game. So like... but the reason I bring this story up is you can see already... Listen, that doesn't make it like not mad to just leave the way he did. But already you can see, there's a reason why... There's a precedent to this. There's things. This is why if you're someone like Nico, you don't. It's not that at the end we're going to agree with you, but if we just knew the reasons why you did it, some of it'll seem less mad by default. We'll be able to put a human element to it, won't we?
Yeah, because I mean, he was. I can't remember who his manager or agent was at the time.
Believe it or not, I believe, because he was in Alliance, wasn't he?
Yeah. I think
it was actually. Yeah,
I think. So before we met,
yes,
properly. Let's say, but I was over there when it was happening, and he was fucking livid. I mean, and utterly convinced that he'd been wronged.
Yes. And I think he specifically had a rivalry with Port as well. So it's like everything combined was just exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Naniwa, great shout. Anyway, we'll move on. First sock. This is another one for the esports historian. If tomorrow fans from all of esports began a discussion of who the greatest player of all time from all games was, who do you think they would pick?
Wait a minute, I lost the premise again. Who is it that's picking? The fans?
All fans.
Yeah.
And they're having a talk.
Yeah.
And it's across all esports.
Right.
And they've got to decide across all the games who is the greatest esports competitor of all time.
It's actually a terrible question because, first of all, like League of Legends fans are not going to vote for anyone from CS, are they? So they're just going to say Faker. So basically, as far as I can tell, Faker. There's only 2 people. This is how this would go. First of all, Faker would just win because it's League of Legends and everyone would see him. If not Faker, actually, it'd be people doing some mad like affectation where they don't know the player they're talking about, just going maybe Boxer or something, but who didn't watch Boxer play. So I think the 3 names would be like Faker, Boxer, or Flash. It would just depend what area you're in and how much of a poser you want to be. Logically, it would probably be Faker, I'm guessing, just because how many people watch and play League of Legends, innit?
Yeah, that's what I think too. To answer first question, I think obviously, and look, I don't know how you feel about that as an answer.
Probably isn't as cool an answer as you hope for,
I'm just a contrarian cunt, I think, and just an old jaded man. But like, it does rankle with me that because of the sort of omnipresence of League of Legends, that like the greatest player within League of Legends, from an achievement perspective, probably from a technical perspective, if we're talking about mid as well, maybe across all positions. It's just sort of a given.
Yeah.
That you have to, that he has to be
almost not
considered.
allowed to question it, are you?
That's what I hate.
I know what you mean.
Because there's all these different disciplines in esports and they're essentially non-comparable. You can't, there's no pushback. And because Riot Games have basically rewritten esports history to say we invented this in 2012. And fucking Faker is the king of our game, ergo he is the king of esports and the greatest player of all time. It pisses me off. It rankles with me that you can't bring up anyone else and you can't, fucking argue it. But that would be the answer, unfortunately. And I don't know if it's valid or not. I mean, maybe, but whatever. Harv. It's Carv's question, guys. It's the bit. He's made a run for his back, Duncan, because everyone's expecting big things now.
Every week,
yeah. Eventually, he's going to have a dud. So let's see.
We're going to fucking brutalise him when he does. Tell you what.
Right. Let me just read it first. It's not bad. He said, as a raging narcissist, I recently hosted a gender reveal party. 2 people are dead, another 7 critically injured in the ICU, and Grandad George will never whistle again. As you can probably ascertain, I think it's a rip-roaring success. But what I want to know is, what is the best event or esports party you've ever been to?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because the party one's very interesting in itself. Because I'm trying to think what parties have we ever been to, and how can we even mention them on the air if they are?
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got to filter out the real crazy.
Yeah, of course. The ones where everyone. Basically, here's the one thing I'll say about esports, and it actually is quite mad. Because when I think about it, I don't ever give everyone credit for this. Actually, one thing I'll give credit in our industry for is this, Richard. Bizarrely, unless it's some cunt like Zeus literally filming. The stuff that happens at the after parties does stay at the after parties amazingly. Yeah. No one even seems to ever leak photos. I'm actually impressed. Now I think about it, I'm actually vaguely impressed on this shit. It's because there's almost a moment, like if you're in a strip club or something, where you lock eyes with the player and he just knows in the back of his mind, we weren't here. And no one ever talks about this. And there's just that recognition. You just go on, we unite, don't you? Because that's, as you say, the real best.
Everyone's cheating, basically. So it's a policy. Yeah. It's a policy of mutually assured destruction. That's what that is. Everyone's shagging around.
Yeah, they know that I could probably find their girlfriend in his Twitter bio with a heart icon and message her. And just, at that point, it wouldn't be worth it, would it? Exactly. So, never mind what I'm doing. You just fucking jog on with your pint. So, no, what would like the official answer be? Because the problem is, for an after party, I'll give actually some interesting info for fans who don't know this. After parties actually got about 10 times worse in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Because unfortunately, one of the actual benefits that we didn't know at the time of Twitch having not only a monopoly, but spending fuck tons of money in the esports space with retainers and stuff, is they used to basically bankroll all the after parties. And so it was just taken for granted. Yep. Any event that was on Twitch would have a Twitch after party where they would pay for all the bar, all the tab for a nightclub or something. The reason why I say that the parties have gotten worse is you could tell the events where I didn't even fully understand that Twitch entirely ran the after party, Richard, because they're the events where when Twitch no longer did it, there was one, I won't say the location, where we went there and we were just in the bar, the normal bar that you can have your food in. And then I just said, so when's the after party? And I'm not joking. They just go, this is it. And all they'd done is turn the lights down 10% and the music up 20%. And I was like, this is a joke, right? Because it's just it's a normal bar. And it goes without saying, any after party where the general public can just walk in, I'm out already. I have no interest in being there. So I have to say, a lot of the really cool after parties are probably a while ago now.
Yeah,
the really big boy ones.
To dig them out. I can tell you the absolute worst one. Because there was one, and I won't name names. I don't know if we've ever talked about it. But basically, we got back to some hotel. And there was an Irish traveller family having a wedding there, right? And obviously, they were packing in the numbers. And a player I was drinking with
I know the reference you're talking about. I know, yeah.
Was smashed and said, "Are we having a deagle party?" And they heard it as a dingle, who were the sort of bumpkin characters from Emmerdale at the time.
Curb Your Enthusiasm shit, if you know the reference. It's so unfortunate that he's bumbled this and said essentially what would be the most insulting thing he could say to this family of travellers.
And so That shit fucking escalated pretty intensely. And me being me, I told the players, don't worry, I'll tank this one for the team. And so I essentially was in the crosshairs of an entire family of travelers who were all queuing up to batter me to death. Now, I could have probably tanked it, right? Like, could have just took a punch to the jaw and but instead I decided to sort of like go Scarface, and I locked myself in a room and was like setting it so there was only one way in, and he'd have to come in basically I was treating it like I was in the fucking mines of Moria, like I was ready to go, like.
Yeah.
And so those guys were like worrying what was going to happen. Hotel security were coming up. They were asking me to leave. So I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not the one committing any acts of violence. And they're going, yeah, but we can't throw out an entire wedding. That's essentially paying to be in the hotel. So will you leave? I went, no, I'm not leaving. So in the end, police turned up. I had to be put into fucking protective custody. The police took me out with like a blanket over my head while I was getting bottles and beer cans launched. I hadn't even said nothing. This is the classic Richard Lewis story. I did nothing. I didn't say anything. Yet it's me. They target me, right? It's Lauder all over again, right? So they put a blanket over my head, like I'd committed a fucking crime. Bottles being launched at me. I got smuggled outside. They drove me down the street and said, "Do not come back."
Nonce getting taken away by the police.
Yeah, I got the nonce treatment. You are right. I got the nonce treatment.
No evidence. They had no evidence. I'll never get over that song. By the way, that's just burned in my fucking brain. I can't get it out. It's just too much.
So anyway, that was a bad one. But anyway, a good one. There was. Do you remember? I can't even remember. It was a Gfinity. I want to say. There was a Gfinity where it was like me, you, or it might have been a Face. I always get it mixed up. But OJ Borg was there.
Oh, okay.
I remember we were in that bar in London till like fucking the sun came up.
I think it was probably Gfinity or something then, yeah.
Yeah, it must have been. Say what you want about Gfinity, whether or not you like their events, whether or not you had fun working their events. But fucking, their parties were fucking legit.
Yeah.
They'd take you to a fucking casino, you'd gamble there, they'd give you a few, some money behind the bar. They knew everyone. You were never getting fucked with. If anyone fucked with you, they'd be instantly thrown out. So in that sense, you didn't have to worry. Yeah, there was some real good ones there. Like, I do remember, I wouldn't say too much about it, but me and OJ Borg, he's a fucking skinny motherfucker. He's doing cycling and that now. Me and him went like fucking drink for drink one night. I just remember being there. It was like 7, 8 a.m. The buses are on. Everyone's going to work. And fucking summer's coming. That was a good one. They're the best ones. The ones where you don't go home until the party is legit done. So, but in terms of the stories, we're probably still a bit too far away.
Yes.
Because, not a lot of people passing drugs tests in esports. That certainly wouldn't have done. Anyway, okay, so there you go. Watch Doge. What do you miss most from the pre-social media world?
I'm not even joking. You have to remember, I've been on Twitter since 2009, so it does genuinely feel like a different person in a different lifetime. I've had time. I'm not joking. I've had time remembering before Twitter in a way, like as in I can't put my life in the same context before then. So I'll give one example, an obvious one, which was it was really easy to be left alone.
Yeah.
You could just choose when you interacted with people. You didn't feel like there was a faucet that when you turned, the entire fucking ocean just flows into your room,
Recommit on Steam. Now that MSL has started a team called South, God, I didn't even mention that on the show.
Probably get to that next one, I'm sure.
Well, mate, we talked about the fucking lineup.
True.
Suicide Squad. He's just called it South now. I mean, brilliant. Right. And now that MSL has started a team called South, will the North-South divide rear its ugly head in CS? No, it won't, because obviously North are dead, and it's not going to be called South. Well, it might be called South forever, actually, because I don't really see how that team's getting picked up anytime soon. So yeah, who knows? And then the last question. Oh, can't believe he's done this. This is not good, mate. Echo, you are now God. These are the questions you don't answer, but you are now God. What is your first action? Remove that question, mate.
Wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't you like to know?
There you go, mate.
Problem is, I'd need to actually be a God who can't be questioned before I could really tell you what my first move would be. Tell you what, it'd be a banger right out the gate. I'd be. If you think what Thanos was fucking around with, I'd go further than him, mate. I'd be. Now my reality can be anything I want it to be. All of a sudden, Carmack's just a fucking frog in my pot. You know, the whole thing would be mental. The whole world would just be morphing around me as I'm going to be mental. Yeah, it'd be so sick though. I can't lie.
Oh yeah, for you, but mostly for you. Yeah. But
it'd be a trail of tears for everyone else. Don't worry about that.
Whereas me, what I would do is I would create a society that has everything it needs to get to the next stage of humanity, and a sustainable planet for us all to live on in peace and harmony. As
just no Lauder. That's only one thing. Just no Lauder. Everyone else.
I didn't even say that.
He doesn't even exist anymore.
No, he's definitely there. He's definitely there. We're all there. Okay. We're all there, Duncan, living in harmony.
Okay,
that's what I want. I'm a believer. I'm a dreamer.
When does it go dark though? What's the hidden under?
Yeah. So and after that, what do you do after that?
Yeah.
What do you do after that?
Where's this all leading though? Where's it get good?
Yeah. When does it get good? No, it just doesn't. It's all fine. So there you go. Great question, Eckler. Thanks for trying to ruin my life. And there you go. That's the end of the show. We just talked about bollocks for a bit.
Just like the way, like what was so pitch perfect about that was Richard gave that whole massive thing about how anything you said could be taken against you at any time, and then the next question is. So if you were God and had no accountability or consequences, what would you do?
Yeah, I know. Like
there's no upside to answering the question.
No, exactly. I just did out the herd a bit, me. Like, you know, how are you ever gonna fucking? You know, what do you want me to say, man? What do you want me to say? Anyway, that's the show. So shout out to the sponsor. If I was God, I'd give you all NordVPN, best VPN on the market. Go to nordvpn.com/RLS to get 74% off. That's almost as good as getting it for free from an omnipotent being. And of course, a shout out to all of our patrons. Our $100 patron, Jerky's Minion, Chris, Will the Weed Wrangler, Kafal, J Dubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Carv, Benakagi, Marcus Kiumpar, and our $50 patrons, Otarian, Frankie, J Ray, Zumba, Petty Grievances, Tim Frost, Bukowski, Dancer Master, Adam Ox, Nolan, Judas, Can of Pasito, Airhammer, Norwegian Clamai, Bacon, Goody Woody, Zarathenia, Gerhan Kaya, Lonnie, Fursock, Daniel Magnuson, Echo, thanks for that question, fucker, Rez, Miss Alcoholic, BP420, Watchdog, Reykjavik on Steam, Carter, CMAC 1991, Alex C and Sartoir. That was By the Numbers. We'll probably be back next week unless we get cancelled. If we don't, see you then. Take care.